Hey, creepy crew. If you're new here and love creepy tales, make sure to subscribe. Most people watching aren't subscribed yet. Thanks a ton to those who already are. Like the video and leave a comment. I started posting photos of my outfits online. Nothing big, just trying to feel better about myself, boost my confidence a bit. I wasn't trying to get famous or anything, just a small account, a few likes here and there. It was fun at first. I'd go out on weekends, take pictures with my tripod in empty parking lots, parks, that kind of thing. Most of the comments were harmless, some compliments, some weird emojis, normal internet stuff. Then this one guy started messaging me a lot. His username didn't have a real name in it, just random letters and numbers, but his messages were specific. He'd reply fast, almost like he was waiting for me to post. At first he was polite, stuff like, "You look great," or "Nice lighting in this shot." But then he started asking personal things. He asked where I took the photos, what time I usually go out, even asked if I lived alone. That was a red flag. I didn't answer most of his questions, and when I did, I kept it vague. I told him I was on the other side of the country. I figured that'd put some distance between us, literally. A few days later, I was walking home from work, cutting across the usual path past a small cafe near my street, and there he was, just standing there like it was no big deal. He smiled and waved like we were old friends. I froze for a second, thinking I must be mistaken. But it was definitely him. I recognized his face from the small profile picture. He hadn't said a word about visiting. My stomach dropped. He didn't come up to me, just kept smiling like this was planned. I didn't go to my apartment right away. I took a longer route, circled a few blocks, trying to make sure he wasn't following me. I checked behind me twice. No one there. That night, I locked every window, turned on every light, and kept checking outside every 15 minutes. But I didn't see his face again. For a while. Then I started seeing the same car near my street. Not right in front of my building, just close enough. Once parked across from the gas station, another time at the end of the block. It was a dark gray sedan, kind of beat up, with out-of-state plates. At first I told myself it was just a coincidence. A lot of people drive that kind of car. But then I saw it 3 days in a row, in 3 different spots near my apartment, at different times. Once when I left for work in the morning. Once when I came back around 6 p.m. Once late at night when I took the trash out. Each time, I felt that same tight feeling in my chest, but I still kept telling myself I was being paranoid. It was a week later when he actually approached me again. I was unlocking the main door to my building, groceries in one arm, fumbling with my keys, when he came out of nowhere. Just stepped up behind me and said, "Hey, I was thinking maybe we could go check out the mall together." I turned around too fast and dropped half my stuff. He didn't help pick anything up. He just stood there, watching me. Smiling again. I said, "I don't think that's a good idea," and tried to make it sound polite, like maybe he'd take the hint. But he kept standing there. He said, "I just want to make sure you're safe. It would make me feel better." That line didn't make any sense. Him feel better? I managed to get the door open and slipped inside, locking it behind me. He didn't try to follow, just stood outside like he was waiting for something. I didn't look back again. My brother was staying with me at the time. He was the first one to really believe something was off. I told him what happened, and he got serious fast. He asked what the guy's car looked like. I described it. The dent on the passenger door, the faded license plate, the sticker on the back window that said something about a fishing club. I hadn't caught the full plate number, but I remembered it started with a 9 and had 2 Qs. My brother told me if I saw that car again, or if he did, we should take a photo. Just in case. The next few days, he kept checking out the window, kept his phone nearby. He started spending more time sitting on the balcony with a coffee or pretending to smoke, just watching the street. Then one afternoon, he came into the living room holding his phone and said, "Got it." He'd seen the car parked down the block and took a few pictures, zoomed in on the license plate and everything. We looked at the photos together, and it was definitely the same car. Same dent, same sticker, same out-of-state plate. After that, it was harder to pretend this was all just a misunderstanding. The car was there. He was here. He'd lied about everything, his location, his intentions. That night, we saw the car again. This time, it was parked directly across the street from our building. No one inside it, at least not that we could tell. My brother grabbed his phone and started recording from the kitchen window. After that night, I started to panic. I couldn't go anywhere without feeling like I was being watched. Even going to the corner store made my skin crawl. I started avoiding the usual routes, switching up the time I left home, checking every parked car twice before stepping outside. My brother noticed right away. He suggested I call him every single time I spotted a car that looked suspicious. He even started reaching out to a couple friends who worked private security for nearby restaurants. They promised to keep an eye out for anything unusual, especially someone just sitting in a car for too long. It got worse. One day, when I was coming home from work, my neighbor mentioned casually, "Hey, your friend was by again. Asked when you'd be back." I froze and asked her to describe him. It was him. She thought nothing of it, said he seemed polite, concerned even. I didn't blame her. How was she supposed to know? But the idea that he was now asking my neighbors about me, like we were close or something, made my stomach twist. I started thinking about changing my number. Blocking him hadn't done much. He kept making new accounts. But before I made that step, I figured we needed to go through the police. My brother agreed. He said it was time to stop pretending this might go away on its own. Still, I felt trapped. People around me tried to be supportive, but most of the advice I got was some version of, "Try not to panic," or, "He hasn't actually done anything yet." That's the part that kept me frozen. He hadn't touched me, hadn't broken in, hadn't made threats, but it felt like something was coming, just waiting to happen. I couldn't sleep properly. I stopped posting anything online. I didn't even take my phone out when walking home. Just kept my keys between my fingers and walked fast. A week later, my brother gathered everything we had. Screenshots of the messages, the car photos, timestamps, everything, and took it all to the local police station. He explained the situation clearly, showed the officers the proof, told them what we'd seen and how long it had been happening. They listened, and they didn't dismiss him. One of the officers took it seriously, said they'd keep it under watch, whatever that meant. We didn't expect anything immediate, but we hoped that just reporting it might be enough to scare the guy off. Then something happened. That same week, he showed up again. Twice in the same day. Once in the morning, just standing across the street, watching the building. My brother spotted him and went down, but by the time he got outside, the guy was gone. Then, that evening, we heard someone buzzing all the apartments from the front door. Over and over, like he was trying to guess which one was mine. When someone answered, he asked straight up, "Do you know which unit she lives in? The girl who takes fashion photos?" That was it. The police showed up not long after. Someone must have called about the buzzing. They talked to him right in front of our building. We watched from the window, my brother filming quietly with his phone. They didn't arrest him on the spot, but they didn't let him go either. They took him with them for questioning, said they'd look into his behavior. It wasn't clear what that meant exactly, but at least he was gone for the night. I should have felt relief, and part of me did. But another part knew this might not be over. There was nothing stopping him from coming back. He knew where I lived. He knew what my neighbors looked like. He'd gotten inside the building before. That whole night, I kept all the lights off and sat on the floor with my back to the wall, listening for any sound in the hallway. Nothing happened, but I didn't relax. It hit me for the first time how real this was. Some guy from the internet had crossed into my actual life, physically, with no shame. I kept thinking how easy it had been, how I never really hid where I was. My photos had street signs sometimes, a park bench someone local might recognize, the skyline from my neighborhood. I never thought twice about it before. That changed fast. They released him the next day, but only after giving him a formal notice. He was not allowed to come near me, my home, or make any further contact. It was technically a warning, tied to a disorderly conduct charge. Not much, but enough to file a record. My brother made sure we got a copy of everything. He didn't come back after that. Not once. No more weird cars, no more new accounts, no more unexpected appearances. I'd like to say that was the end of it, but it wasn't. Not really. Even now, months later, I still check the street every time I step outside. I changed my phone number, locked my socials, started posting only generic stuff. Nothing with locations, nothing with familiar landmarks. The apartment building doesn't feel the same. I moved my bed away from the window, stopped opening the curtains at night. My brother says I've changed, that I'm more cautious now. I think he means it as a compliment. Maybe it is. He's gone. But I'm still adjusting to the fact that someone who knew nothing about me could learn everything just from a screen. I never thought twice about the little details before. The background of a photo, the time I posted, the places I tagged. Now I think about all of it. What I learned is simple. Normal life can change fast. Sometimes all it takes is the wrong person noticing you. I usually hit the gym after work, trying to make it there by 6 in the evening. It wasn't a fancy place, just a small fitness center tucked in between a liquor store and a dry cleaner. But it was clean and quiet, which I liked. I had my routine. 15 minutes on the treadmill, some light stretching, a few machines if I wasn't too tired. Most people kept to themselves, headphones in, quick nods if you made eye contact. I liked that. After a couple weeks of going regularly, I started to notice something odd, but small. There was a guy who always seemed to finish his workout around the same time I did. At first, I didn't think much of it. Plenty of people have similar work schedules, right? But it was the consistency that got to me. Different people came and went, but he was there almost every time, leaving just minutes after I did. He was maybe mid-30s, tall, thin, always wore the same black hoodie. I didn't remember seeing him use any machines, just some free weights, stretching. He never smiled, never talked to anyone, but I caught him watching me in the mirror once or twice. Still, I brushed it off. One evening, I was leaving just after sunset. The parking lot lights had just flickered on. I was digging through my bag for my car keys when I saw someone standing 2 spaces over, leaning against a black SUV. It was him. He wasn't doing anything, just looking at his phone, but his eyes flicked up when I passed. Then he smiled. Wide. Too wide. I gave a quick nod, said nothing, and got into my car. The whole drive home I kept thinking maybe I was being paranoid. It was probably just a coincidence. The parking lot wasn't big. Next couple of days I watched more carefully. Sure enough, every time I finished and walked outside, he was just behind me. He never left before I did. I started to adjust my routine slightly. Stayed 5 minutes longer, switched machines around, tried stretching in a different corner. Still, somehow, He was always finishing right when I was. One night, I came out and he was already standing next to his car again, but this time, it was parked directly beside mine. That was new. I paused for a second before heading toward my driver's side. As I walked past him, he looked up from his phone again and said, "Hey," smiling like we knew each other. I muttered a quiet, "Hi," kept my eyes down, and unlocked my door. I drove off without looking back. The next time I went, I felt uneasy walking in. I checked the parking lot. No sign of the SUV. Inside, I kept glancing around between sets. Half an hour later, just as I was wiping down the treadmill, I saw him stretching near the front window. We made eye contact. He held the stare for too long before turning away. When I left, he followed again. This time, he came closer. I was just unlocking my car when I heard his voice behind me. "You always leave around this time," he said. "I knew I'd run into you." I turned, keys tight in my hand. "Yeah," I replied, trying to sound normal. "I usually come after work." He smiled again, like it was a private joke between us. "You're really consistent. That's good. Keeps the body sharp." Then, like he'd known me for years, he asked, "Got plans tonight?" I gave a weak smile and shook my head. "Kinda in a rush. Have to be somewhere." I stepped toward the door, trying to create space. He didn't take the hint. "I can give you a ride if you want, or maybe next time." "No, I'm good, thanks." I opened the door quickly. "I'm usually parked here. You probably noticed." His tone was casual, but it made my skin crawl. I got in and closed the door. He stood there a second longer, then gave a small wave and turned back toward his SUV. I didn't start breathing normally until I was halfway home. Still, I told myself maybe he was just lonely. Some people don't know how to act socially. Maybe I was overreacting. That theory didn't hold long. A week passed, and I skipped the gym twice. I needed a break, but mostly I wanted to see if the routine would shake him off. The third day, I went back. Normal session. Didn't see him inside. I left just before 7, walking quickly in the fading light. At my car, I found something under the windshield wiper. A note. Just a folded piece of lined paper. No envelope. I looked around fast, but the lot was mostly empty. One other car pulling out. I opened the note. "I'm not bad. I just want to walk you to your car sometime." That's all it said. No name, no number. Just that. I didn't wait around. I got in and locked the doors. The whole drive home, I checked the rearview mirror every few seconds. I didn't see anyone behind me, but that note, it changed everything. This wasn't just a guy being awkward. This was someone watching closely, keeping track of my schedule, planning how to approach. Not just a smile in the parking lot, not just a weird conversation. He knew when I came. He knew when I left. He'd waited for me. And now he was leaving messages. I didn't go to the gym the next day, or the day after. On the third day, I drove by around 6:15 just to see. The black SUV was parked in the exact same spot. Over time, it wasn't just him approaching me outside the gym anymore. I started noticing his SUV behind me when I drove home. At first, I tried to convince myself it was just another similar car, but I made sure. I took a longer route once, looping through a gas station and making a few random turns. He stayed behind me, not tailgating, but always a few cars back. I didn't want to believe he was following me, but it was clear. Sometimes he'd drop off a few blocks before my apartment complex. I'd watch in the rear view as he turned away. He never came all the way to my street, at least not when I was looking. A few times I thought about slamming on the brakes, getting out, and asking what the hell he wanted, but I couldn't risk it. I didn't know what he'd do if I confronted him. Then I got sick. just a cold, nothing serious. But I skipped the gym for a couple days. The morning after I missed my second session, I went to my car and found something tucked under the windshield wiper again. A wrapped candy. Something red and shiny. Under it, a small note in the same handwriting as before. "Get well soon. I'll be waiting for you at the gym." That was when it hit me. He either knew where I lived or was driving around my area. He didn't just know my routine anymore. He was getting closer. I called my friend and told her everything. She was quiet for a second, then said, "You need to go to the police, now." But what was I going to say? He hadn't threatened me directly. He hadn't touched me. No crime had technically been committed. I was afraid they'd shrug it off. Maybe even say I was imagining it. But I wasn't imagining the note. I wasn't imagining the SUV in my mirror. That week, I started going through all my accounts, checking what was public. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. One of my gym selfies from a few weeks back had been liked by a new profile. It wasn't someone I knew, and the name didn't ring a bell. But the account had no posts, no friends, just a blank face and a private profile. I clicked on it. Nothing. But then I checked the comments. That same account had commented on a different post from a few months earlier. "Strong routine," it said. Nothing else. I hadn't posted any exact locations, but I had tagged the gym once or twice. That was all it took. He had found me. He knew my name now. He'd found my social media. I didn't know how much else he'd figured out. I called my friend again, and this time she didn't just suggest. I could hear the panic in her voice. "You need to stop going there. I don't care about the money. Just stop." I didn't want to. The gym had been my only consistent routine. It was the one place I could focus, clear my head. But she was right. I couldn't go back there. Not with him waiting. So I stopped. I ate the cost of the monthly pass. I stayed home, changed my habits, started going for runs in a different neighborhood. No tags, no updates, no posts. I blocked the account, deleted the photos. I removed every geotag I could find. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that he might be watching. I'd sit in my car before leaving the house, scanning the street. I'd cross the road if I saw a black SUV, even if it wasn't the same one. I changed my routes, varied my timing, never took the same turn twice in a row. Every night, I checked the peephole before stepping out of my apartment. Every night, I looked behind me before unlocking the car. I kept my phone in my hand, emergency number pulled up, just in case. A month passed. Then 2. No notes, no SUV, nothing. Eventually, life started to feel normal again. My friend told me about a different gym across the city. She drove me there the first few times to make sure I felt okay. It was bigger, more crowded. Lots of exits. I kept my head down, avoided conversation, and never stayed long. I started working out again, slowly. I never posted about it. I kept my social media locked down. No names, no locations, no photos of my car. It felt like starting over, safer. The notes never came back. The SUV never showed up. I started to let myself relax. Sometimes I'd even forget to check the street before stepping outside. But not always. That feeling, like something could happen again at any time, never really left. After a while, I deleted all my old accounts and started fresh. No public information. No connections to my real name. I made sure no one could trace anything back. I even stopped telling people where I was going unless they really needed to know. I never found out who he was. Never saw him again. Maybe he moved on. Maybe he lost interest. Or maybe he's just waiting for another person to tag a photo at that gym. But I still glance over my shoulder at night. Still avoid parked black SUVs. And sometimes, When I walk to my car and see something on the windshield, my chest tightens until I realize it's just a flyer or some trash blown by the wind. Then I breathe. But the fear never fully goes away. I used to work evening shifts and always got off pretty late. My usual routine was to head to the same bus stop near the shopping plaza, just down the street from where I worked. It wasn't a crowded stop, usually just one or two people around, sometimes no one. The area had a convenience store across the road, some streetlights, and a bench under a rusted shelter. Not the safest looking place, but it was familiar. One night, it was colder than usual, and I was standing there waiting like always when a guy approached me. He looked to be in his late 20s, clean clothes, short hair, nothing out of place. He was holding a paper coffee cup and handed it to me without much of a word, just said, "You looked like you were freezing." I was surprised, but I took it. The lid was still sealed, and it felt warm. I thanked him, but I kept it short. I didn't know him, and it felt weird to have someone just hand me a drink out of nowhere. He stayed, asked where I worked. I told him I was just coming off shift. Then he said if I ever got stuck without a ride, he'd be happy to drive me home sometime. I declined, as politely as I could. Told him I didn't usually accept rides from people I didn't know well. He just smiled and said, "Fair enough." We stood there a few minutes, and when my bus came, he said goodbye and didn't get on. I figured that was it. Just a strange, maybe slightly awkward encounter. But 3 days later, same time, same stop, there he was again. He didn't have coffee this time. He just nodded like we were already familiar and said something like, "Cold again, huh?" I answered politely, trying to keep the tone neutral. He started chatting about the weather, a road closure nearby, and some city protest he'd read about. Normal stuff. After a few minutes, I realized he was standing just a bit closer than felt natural. Not enough to make a scene, but close enough to notice. I looked around. There was one older woman waiting for a different bus, but that was it. The next time I saw him was the following week. I thought maybe it had been coincidence before, but now I wasn't so sure. Again, same stop, same time, and he just showed up like he'd been waiting. He joked like we were old friends. "We've got a routine now," he said. "Feels like we've known each other for ages." I gave a small laugh, mostly to avoid awkwardness. But I kept checking the street, wishing the bus would come faster. It started to bother me how he always showed up just minutes before I did. I started leaving work at slightly different times, but no matter what, within 2 or 3 minutes of arriving at the stop, he would walk up. I once asked him how he always seemed to be around, and he just said, "Crazy timing, right?" and smiled. But it didn't feel like that. That third time, I decided to pay more attention. I looked around the area before walking to the stop. I didn't see him anywhere. No parked cars with the engine running. No one across the street or near the corner. But still, about a minute after I got there, he showed up from behind the convenience store. He said he'd just grabbed a snack. We got on the same bus. He sat beside me, kept talking. Told me some story about how he used to live out in the suburbs but moved into the city recently. He talked fast, threw in jokes, laughed a lot. I nodded along, but I didn't give much back. Then his questions started shifting. First, he asked what part of the city I lived in. I just said, "Not far," and changed the topic. Then he asked if I lived alone. I said I had roommates. After that, he asked if I was close with my family, whether they lived nearby. I gave vague answers, told him I didn't like talking about personal stuff. He laughed it off and said, "Just making conversation." The bus was crowded enough that I didn't feel unsafe in the moment, but I was uncomfortable. He didn't seem aggressive, but he was pushing the line, watching me too closely, not reacting like someone who just wanted to pass the time. When the bus neared my stop, I told him I was getting off early to grab groceries. I lied. I didn't want him knowing where I lived. He didn't get off with me, but before I left, he said, "Maybe next time I can walk you home, just to be sure you're safe." I didn't answer. I stepped off the bus and waited until it pulled away before I crossed the street. I watched the windows, just to be sure he wasn't watching me from inside. One evening, I decided to change things up. I had this gut feeling that staying on the same route was a mistake, so instead of heading to my usual stop, I walked an extra 10 minutes and waited at a different one across the boulevard. It was more crowded, and the bus routes were slightly longer, but I didn't care. I just wanted space from him. The bus came, and I sat near the front, facing the aisle, keeping my eyes open. Everything felt fine at first. No sign of him. But when I got off, several stops earlier than usual, someone called out from behind me. I turned, and there he was, walking fast to catch up. He smiled like we were friends bumping into each other by chance. "Looks like we're just meant to run into each other," he said. I didn't say anything. My stomach dropped. I hadn't seen him on the bus. I don't know when he got on. He walked beside me a few steps, started asking if I wanted to grab a coffee or take a walk. It was already past 9, and the street was dim. Closed shops, flickering signs, barely any cars passing. I told him no, firmly. Said I had to get home. He laughed it off but didn't move. I walked faster, crossing the street without waiting for the light. He didn't follow, but he did call out something behind me. I didn't catch it. I didn't want to. I kept walking without turning my head, trying to act like I wasn't bothered, but my heart was pounding. He knew where I got off. That was no accident. I had gone out of my way to avoid him, and he still showed up. I knew right then this wasn't just coincidence anymore. After that night, I stopped taking the bus entirely. I started using taxis, even though it was expensive. I figured paying extra was worth it to feel safer, even if it meant cutting into money for other things. But 2 nights later, I saw him again. Not close, but standing back at my old bus stop like nothing had changed. Same jacket, same calm posture, leaning slightly like he was just waiting. I was in the taxi, and we passed by quickly, but I caught him turning his head. Like he was looking for someone. Like he was looking for me. I didn't stop. I didn't ask the driver to turn around. I just sank into the seat and told myself not to panic. Another night, I had to walk past that stop on the way to a store near my building. He was there again, pretending to scroll his phone. As I passed, he called out, something like, "Hey!" But I didn't stop. I didn't even flinch. Just kept walking until I was out of sight. At work, people asked if I was okay. One of the cashiers said I looked tired all the time. I couldn't really explain it without sounding dramatic or paranoid. What was I supposed to say? That a guy who once offered me coffee now shows up everywhere I go. I thought about asking for help. I had a coworker who sometimes drove close to my neighborhood. I figured maybe I could ask her for a ride for a few nights. I also had a friend who lived 2 blocks away. Maybe she could meet me sometimes, walk with me. But I hesitated. I didn't want to drag people into something that might still be harmless. Or at least, that's what I told myself. Deep down, I think I just didn't want to admit how much it had gotten to me. Then, he disappeared. For nearly 2 weeks, I didn't see him at all. No figure at the bus stop, no voice calling out, no strange presence on the sidewalk, nothing. At first, I was suspicious, kept checking over my shoulder, still avoided my usual routes. But after a while, I started to think maybe he'd finally moved on. Maybe he'd found someone else to bother. That false sense of relief lasted until one early morning, around 6. I had stayed home the night before and was taking out the trash before work. It was cold and quiet, barely any light yet. I opened the door, walked out toward the bins near the curb, and then I saw him. He was standing across the street. Not moving, not walking, just standing there, facing my building. I froze. He didn't wave, didn't say anything, just stared toward my side of the street. I dropped the bag in the bin and backed away slowly. I didn't run. I just walked fast, eyes down, heart racing. When I got inside, I locked the door, deadbolt, chain, all of it. Then I checked through the peephole, but he was gone. I waited 10 minutes, maybe more. Then I called someone I knew, a guy who used to work security at a nearby office park. He lived a few blocks away and sometimes helped people in the area with things like this. He didn't ask many questions, just said he'd come by later, have a look around. He even offered to swing by the building the next couple mornings, just to make sure no one was hanging around. I never saw the guy again after that. No more surprise appearances. No more waiting at bus stops. He vanished as suddenly as he had started. Maybe he finally realized I wasn't going to talk to him. Maybe the sight of someone else checking the building scared him off. I don't know. But I still double-check the locks every night. Still glance through the window before stepping out in the morning. I keep thinking back to that moment when I saw him outside. No smile, no words. Just watching. You don't forget that kind of thing. Not easily. Not when someone almost becomes part of your daily routine without permission. Not when you realize how quietly someone can insert themselves into your life without ever really crossing the line. Until they do. When I found a handwritten note under my notebook during a break between classes, I thought it was a joke. It wasn't taped or anything. It was just sitting there, almost too neatly, as if someone had carefully slid it underneath without moving the rest of my stuff. The paper was small, no lines, and the handwriting was careful, slanted slightly to the right. It said something simple, like, "You look beautiful when you're focused." I looked around and laughed it off with the girl sitting next to me. Thought maybe it was one of my friends messing with me. It was the kind of prank someone in our group would pull for a laugh. I even took a photo of it and sent it to our group chat. "Which one of you is in love with me, LOL?" A couple of them replied with laughing emojis. One said, "Not me," and another said, "Someone's got a secret admirer," but no one admitted to it. I tossed the note in my bag and forgot about it for a while. A few days later, another one turned up. This time it was inside my pencil case. I opened it in the library and found it folded between my highlighters. "Your smile makes even rainy days feel warm." Again, neat handwriting. Same slant. No name. I started feeling a bit weird. My pencil case hadn't left my sight all day. I hadn't even opened it except for once in class, and it stayed zipped in my bag the rest of the time. But I still tried to laugh it off. Maybe someone was being cute. Maybe someone liked me and was just too shy to say it directly. I told my roommates, They joked about me having a stalker, but it didn't feel serious at the time. Still, the notes kept coming. Once, I found one inside my laptop sleeve. Another time, in the side pocket of my backpack, tucked between my lip balm and keys. All of them were written in the same style. Compliments, sweet phrases, nothing threatening, but always showing that the person had been close to my stuff. Too close. I started watching my bag more carefully. I started locking my dorm room even for short trips to the laundry room or kitchen. I even started carrying my bag to the bathroom stalls when I was out, just in case. I thought maybe I was being paranoid, but it was the only thing I could do to feel somewhat in control. One day I opened a book for my political science class and found another note. I hadn't opened that book in over a week, and I'd last used it at home, on my desk. The note was between pages 74 and 75. I froze. I hadn't taken that book outside the apartment since I brought it home from the library. I asked my roommates if anyone had borrowed it, but they all shook their heads. None of them had touched it. The note said, "Even when you're alone, you shine. I see you." I didn't sleep well that night. My roommate said it was probably someone who managed to peek in during the day while the door was open. Or maybe it happened at the library and I just didn't notice. But that didn't sit right with me. I always zipped my bag. I always carried it home. I started thinking more about the layout of our apartment. We lived in student housing, a shared unit with 3 bedrooms and a common area. The front door was one of those that locked automatically when closed, but if someone entered when one of us was inside and forgot to relock it behind them, it would stay unlocked. That had happened a few times. I remembered once I'd run down to get delivery and didn't shut the door all the way. It made me sick thinking about it. My friends suggested it might be someone from the building, maybe someone who'd been inside before, like a friend of a roommate. I didn't like thinking about that. I started locking the small locker I used at school, even though no one else really did. I also stopped leaving my backpack on the bench when I went to grab coffee from the campus cafe. But even with all that, the notes kept showing up. One in the inner pocket of my jacket, one inside my notebook, the one I kept at the bottom of my bag and only took out for classes twice a week. It was like this person was trying to prove a point. The worst part was that it didn't feel random anymore. It felt planned. They weren't just sneaking notes into whatever they could. They were choosing spots that I thought were safe, places I didn't expect anyone else to touch. It was like they were showing me they were a step ahead, like they knew what I'd do next. I started checking over my stuff every morning, every night. I'd lay everything out on my bed and go through each pocket and compartment before sleeping. One time I was in the hallway outside our lecture hall, waiting for class to start. I had my earbuds in, scrolling on my phone. People were moving around, rushing to get to their seats or chatting with friends. Then, suddenly, I felt something. Not physical, just that weird awareness you get when someone's watching you. I looked up. There were maybe 20 people in the hallway, all doing their own thing. A couple glanced at me when I looked up, but no one looked suspicious. Still, that feeling didn't go away. After that, I noticed it more often. In the cafeteria, on the path between the dorms and the library, in the back of the classroom. Someone always seemed to be just far enough to not stand out, but close enough to watch. My friends said I was being paranoid, but I knew that stare. It didn't feel like curiosity or friendliness. It felt like surveillance. I stopped using the locker at school altogether and carried all my things with me. I even bought a small padlock for my backpack, one of those tiny ones people use on suitcases. I knew it wouldn't stop someone determined, but it made me feel like I was at least doing something. I started sitting near exits and windows during class. I left my dorm only when I had to and tried to stay in groups. But the notes kept coming. I found the last one inside my biology textbook, folded so thin it looked like a sliver of paper. It read, "No lock will keep me out." After I found the note that said, "No lock will keep me out," I realized I couldn't just wait it out anymore. This wasn't some shy secret admirer with a crush. This was someone deliberately invading my space and enjoying the fear they were causing. That same night, I wrote a message and posted it to all the group chats I was in. Our course group, dorm group, club chat, everything. I didn't name names. I just explained what had been happening with the notes, how they kept appearing even after I took extra precautions, and asked if anyone had any idea who might be behind it. Most people responded with support or curiosity. A few offered theories. Maybe it was someone from another program, or someone I'd rejected without knowing, or even someone doing it as a twisted joke. One guy said he'd seen someone standing too close behind me in the library once, but didn't get a good look. Nothing solid, just guesses and vague details. No one confessed. No one even stood out. But the tone of the notes changed after that. The next one I found wasn't flattering at all. It said, "You ask for answers, but ignore the truth. You don't appreciate what's given to you." It was written with more pressure, almost like the pen had scratched through the paper. Another said, "Stop running. You belong to me." I started skipping classes more often, making excuses to stay in the dorm or work remotely. I told my professors I wasn't feeling well. It wasn't a total lie. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat properly, and every time I stepped outside, I felt like I was being watched. I stayed up late reading through every old message, looking for clues, rereading the handwriting to see if something stood out. A week later, I went to the library in the morning, trying to act normal, and found another note inside my current events notebook. This one made my stomach drop. "Why are you avoiding me?" it said. "We used to be so close." The problem was, I'd never had any kind of close relationship with anyone that fit this pattern. I had a few classmates I talked to, some people I worked on projects with, but no one who'd act like we were close. That's when I understood. This person was imagining a connection that didn't exist. That made it worse. This wasn't someone angry over a breakup or being rejected. This was someone who believed we had something real. I couldn't pretend it was harmless anymore. Whoever it was, they were watching me up close, probably every day. I started recognizing patterns, where I sat, when I left class early, when I used my phone, when I was alone. They knew all of it. It was already dark when I left the cafeteria one night, just after dinner. The walkway between the cafeteria and the dorms was dim, with only a few streetlights. I kept my head down, earbuds in, pretending to scroll my phone. That's when I noticed the footsteps. Not fast, not loud, but too consistent. I slowed down. They slowed. I turned a corner quickly, and they turned too. That's when I broke into a run. I sprinted down the walkway and ducked into the closest building I could find. The admin wing was closed, but the bathroom lights were on. I ran into the women's restroom and locked myself in the last stall. My heart was hammering in my ears, and I stayed completely still, crouched on the toilet seat. For several minutes, there was nothing. No door opening, no footsteps. Then silence. I waited 10 more minutes before stepping out. The hallway was empty. The next morning, I opened my school email. In the inbox, among the usual updates and notices, was one anonymous message. It wasn't from any account I recognized. No subject line. Just, "Don't try to hide. I'm always closer than you think." That was it. I stared at it for a long time. I'd never mentioned the bathroom. I hadn't told anyone about what happened. That meant he saw me. He knew exactly where I went. That was the last straw. I went straight to the administration office. I brought all the notes I'd saved, screenshots of the messages, and a written timeline of everything that had happened. I didn't care anymore if people thought I was overreacting. I wasn't going to wait until it got worse. The dean listened carefully, and to their credit, they took it seriously. Within hours, they launched an internal investigation. They started checking lockers, reviewing camera footage, and talking to staff. We didn't have cameras in all hallways, but they found enough footage to narrow it down. A few days later, they called me in. It turned out to be a guy from my year. I recognized him immediately. We'd worked on a shared presentation months ago. Quiet guy. didn't talk much. He always sat 2 rows behind me in lectures. I'd never thought much of him. But when security searched his dorm room, they found my old pens, a few of my handouts, even printed photos taken from inside my backpack. The worst was a small flash drive full of pictures. Shots of me sitting in class, walking through campus, even one through the window of our dorm kitchen. He never spoke to me directly. He just watched. Took things, left notes. He told staff he thought we had a connection, that I was testing him by pretending not to notice. I wasn't allowed to hear much more. They removed him from campus the same day, and the police were called. I didn't see him again. He was expelled immediately. Security escorted him off campus, and I was told he was being held by police for investigation. They didn't say much about what would happen next, only that they'd keep me updated. I had a panic response for days after. I kept checking doors twice, jumping at noises, watching over my shoulder constantly. My parents wanted me to come home, transfer to another school. But I didn't want to let him take that away from me too. I stayed. Finished the semester. For a while, I only went to class with friends. I avoided being alone. I always sat near the exits, and I didn't use the library unless it was crowded. Slowly, things went back to normal, but the fear stayed. Now, whenever someone looks at me for too long, I get tense. That feeling never fully went away. I don't leave my bag unattended. I don't ignore warning signs. And I've never thrown away a single note from that time, just in case. I work as a cashier in a small supermarket. It's not a big chain, just a local place tucked between a pharmacy and a hardware store. Most of our customers are regulars, older folks picking up groceries, moms grabbing dinner stuff after work, a few teenagers with energy drinks and chips. Nothing exciting, quiet, same people, same routine. So when we got a new security guy, it stood out right away. He introduced himself on his first day, said his name was Pavel. He looked like he was in his late 30s, with that kind of friendly, open face that people naturally trust. First few days, he just did his rounds, checked the cameras, stood by the doors, helped with crowd control on weekends. Then he started lingering by my register. At first, I didn't think much of it. He'd bring me a coffee on slower mornings or crack a joke when the scanner acted up. I figured he was just trying to be nice, friendly workplace stuff. But after about a week, I noticed he didn't hang around other cashiers the same way. He was always by mine. Even when I didn't have a line, he'd stand there leaning on the counter watching. Not in a creepy way exactly, just too much. I started keeping track. He'd come over at least 5 or 6 times a shift, just to chat. It was small talk at first. Then it shifted. One day, out of nowhere, he asked, "So, do you live far from here?" I gave a vague answer, said something like, "Not too far." He nodded and didn't push, but 2 days later he asked, "You live alone?" I laughed it off and said I had roommates, which wasn't even true. He just smiled and said, "That's smart, safer that way." Something about the way he said it made my stomach turn a bit. But I didn't say anything. I didn't want to make it awkward. Maybe it was just the kind of person he was, chatty, nosy, too casual with boundaries. I tried to believe that. I wanted to believe that. But the more I tried to dismiss it, the more often it happened. He'd ask about who was picking me up, if I had someone waiting for me at home. Once, when I had my phone out, he leaned over and said, "Texting your boyfriend?" I just said, "No," and turned away. He didn't say anything else, but he didn't leave either. I kept hoping he'd get bored and move on. The store had 2 other cashiers working my shift, but he always seemed to be near mine. Even when I switched lanes, he'd follow within a few minutes. It got to the point where I stopped talking to him unless I had to. No small talk. No smiles. But that didn't change anything. About 2 weeks after he started, it escalated. I finished a late shift. It was just after 10 p.m. And as I walked to the parking lot, I saw him standing by my car. I hadn't seen him clock out, and I didn't even know he'd left the store. He waved and said, "Hey, just thought I'd wait. It's dark out." I told him thanks, but I was fine, and I tried to keep moving, but he stepped closer and said, "I can give you a ride if you want." I said no, firmly, and got into my car. He didn't argue, just nodded and walked away. But the next night, he did the same thing. Just stood there. Didn't say anything at first. Just waited near my car, arms crossed, like he belonged there. I told him again that I was fine, and again he backed off. But he kept doing it. Every night for the next 3 shifts, he was there. Waiting. I started feeling trapped. I didn't want to make a scene, not with customers around, not with co-workers watching. And I didn't want to report him. He was security after all. Who would I even talk to? The store manager was barely ever on site after 6. One night, I stayed a little later to help with closing paperwork. I thought maybe if I waited long enough, he'd get tired and leave. While I was on the phone with my cousin, confirming weekend plans, I heard a soft noise outside the break room. I didn't think much of it, finished the call, grabbed my bag, and walked out. He was standing just outside the staff entrance like he'd been listening. He said, "I heard you say you're leaving in 10. Figured I'd walk with you to your car. It's safer." I froze for a second. I didn't remember telling him when I was leaving. I realized he must have been eavesdropping. I didn't confront him, just shook my head and said, "I'm good, thanks." He didn't argue, just walked a few steps behind me. Didn't say anything else. I tried to stay calm, kept walking. Got to my car, unlocked it quickly, and got in. I didn't even look back, but I could feel his eyes on me as I drove away. A few days later, things got weirder at the store. One of the supervisors mentioned that there were some unusual login records on the employee database. Someone had accessed personal files without permission. They didn't say who, and most people brushed it off as some glitch or maybe an accidental search. But I couldn't ignore the gut feeling I had. Especially because that same night, when I got home, I noticed a car parked down the road from my apartment building. It wasn't right in front, more like halfway down the block, lights off, just sitting there. I watched it for a few minutes from behind my curtain. No one got out. After a while, it drove off slow, like whoever was inside didn't want to be noticed. The next morning, I saw the same car again, parked a few blocks away when I was leaving for work. That was enough for me. I needed answers. I asked one of the tech guys who worked with system logs if it was possible to see who had been checking employee info. He looked uncomfortable and said he couldn't give names. But later that day, the manager called me into her office. She looked serious and asked if I felt unsafe. I told her everything. The strange behavior, the waiting after work, the questions, the car. I said I had a strong feeling it was Pavel. Turns out I was right. They reviewed the logs and found that Pavel had used his security login to look at several employee files, including mine. Not just once, but multiple times. My schedule, my emergency contact, even my home address. I felt sick. It wasn't just a feeling anymore. He really had been watching me. Management said they were taking it seriously. They suspended him the next morning and launched an internal investigation. A few days later, they confirmed it. He had accessed restricted employee data he had no reason to view. They fired him immediately. The store offered me extra security during my shifts, even mentioned helping with temporary housing if I needed it. But the damage was already done. I couldn't relax anymore. I told them I appreciated the support, but I couldn't keep working there. I handed in my resignation and left by the end of the week. I thought maybe that would be the end of it, that if I cut contact completely, he'd move on. But a week later, I saw the same car again. It was parked across from my building, farther this time, with the lights off, almost hidden in the shadow of a tree. It didn't stay long, maybe 10 minutes, but it was enough. I knew it was him. I didn't even have proof, just a cold feeling in my chest. I called the police and told them everything. They took my statement but said unless he was breaking a restraining order or threatening me directly, there wasn't much they could do. Just keep an eye out, they said. That was the worst part. Knowing someone like him could get that close and no one could stop it. I started checking behind me when walking to the store. I avoided taking the same route twice. I even stopped visiting some family members, worried he might follow me and figure out where they lived. I didn't want to risk it. I decided I needed to disappear. Fast. I found a small apartment in another district across the city. It wasn't ideal, and it wasn't cheap, but it was far enough from the old neighborhood that I felt like I could breathe again. I told only 2 people where I was moving. No social media posts. No change of address forms. I even bought a new SIM card for my phone and left the old one off for a while. I didn't want him finding anything by accident. After moving, things got quiet. The car didn't show up again. I changed my routines, started a different job at a warehouse where no one asked too many questions. The pay wasn't great, but I didn't care. I was just glad no one knew my address. Slowly, I started sleeping again. I bought blackout curtains. I avoided windows at night. A few old friends reached out and asked what happened. I just told them the old job wasn't working out, that there were some weird things going on. I didn't want to relive it. I didn't want to explain how close it came to something worse. The thought that someone could decide they had the right to follow you home, watch you, dig through your private information, it stays with you. Even now, months later, I still get nervous when I see a car the same make and color as his. It could be anyone. But every time, my heart skips. I glance over my shoulder more than I used to. I keep a can of spray in my bag. I don't use the same train station twice in a row. It's just how I live now. If there's one thing I learned, it's to never underestimate small red flags. The jokes, the friendly offers, the casual questions, they add up. I used to think stuff like this only happened in movies, but I know better now. I've lived it. Since then, I avoid any job where employees can access private data without strict supervision. I don't care how nice someone seems. If the system allows that kind of access, I'm out. I wish I could say it's over. I want to believe he moved on. But the truth is, I'll never really know. And because of that, I don't think I'll ever fully feel safe again. I never thought a simple dating app would lead to me being afraid to leave my own apartment. It started pretty normal. I downloaded the app because I wanted to meet new people, nothing serious, just to chat, maybe grab a coffee with someone interesting. That's how I met Artem. Obviously not his real name, but that's what he called himself. His profile wasn't anything flashy, just a few photos, some basic info, said he liked hiking, reading, that kind of thing. We matched and started talking the same day. Right off the bat, he seemed polite, even a bit shy, always asking about my day, sending compliments but not in an over-the-top way. I thought he was just being nice. At first, I didn't see any red flags. We talked about books we liked, places we'd been, typical stuff. He asked me about my hobbies, what music I liked, even my favorite food. I found it sweet that he paid attention to the details. After a few days of chatting, he suggested a video call, and we talked for about an hour. Again, nothing weird. He seemed respectful, listened more than he talked. After we hung up, he texted, "I really enjoyed this. You seem like someone special." I didn't think much of it. Just a compliment, right? But after about a week, the tone started to change. One evening, out of nowhere, he asked me how many male friends I had. I thought it was an odd question, but I answered honestly. Said I had a few, some from work, some from school. He didn't reply for a while, and then he sent, "I think it would be better if you didn't talk to them anymore." I stared at the screen for a bit, confused, then wrote back something like, "That's not really your call, we're just getting to know each other." He replied immediately, "If you're serious about me, you wouldn't need other guys in your life." That was the moment I realized something was off. I told him that I didn't like where this was going, that he was crossing a line. I said I wasn't okay with being told who I could or couldn't be friends with. He sent back a long message, basically saying he was only trying to protect what we had, and that he had been hurt before by girls who couldn't commit. I didn't reply. I needed some space from the whole thing, so I stopped answering his texts. For a couple days, he didn't message. I figured maybe he got the point. But then he started again. This time more aggressive. Messages like, "You're just like the rest," and "You'll regret this." I blocked his number, but then he found me on social media and started messaging from different accounts. Every day, there'd be a new account, a new message. At first, it was just guilt-tripping stuff. "Why are you doing this to me?" Or, "I gave you my trust." But then it turned darker. He started calling me in the evenings, multiple times in a row. I didn't answer, of course, but he'd leave voicemails. The first ones were just him asking where I was, who I was with, why I wasn't picking up. But then came the threats, veiled ones at first. Things like, "I hope you're making the right decisions," or "People who hurt others always get what's coming." I kept blocking every number, every account, but he'd just make new ones. It felt endless. One night, I got a message from a completely new profile. It just said, "You think you're safe?" That's when I remembered I had mentioned the area where I lived during one of our early conversations. Not my exact address, but close enough that he could figure it out if he really tried. That night I couldn't sleep. Every little sound from the hallway or outside made me jump. I started checking the locks twice before bed, keeping the curtains closed all day. I didn't feel safe in my own space anymore. I told my friends what was going on, and most of them said it was time to go to the police. But I didn't know what to report. He hadn't actually done anything, just messages, calls, voicemails. I had screenshots, sure, but it felt like it wouldn't be enough. One of my friends said, "This isn't normal anymore. This is obsession." She was right. The way he kept finding ways to reach me, the tone of the messages. It wasn't just about being upset anymore. It was about control. I tried to think of ways to prove he was a real threat. Maybe I could record one of his calls, but I never answered. I didn't want to give him any opening to think I was still interested. The problem was, all I had were screenshots of disturbing messages and voicemails that sounded creepy, but not enough to make a solid case. I started thinking maybe I should move, at least temporarily, but I didn't have anywhere to go. Then one evening, while I was checking my phone, I got a new message request from another random profile. It was just one sentence. "Nice coat. You always wear that when you go out, don't you?" The message about my coat was the breaking point, but things got worse. A few days later, I walked into work and immediately noticed people looking at me differently. Not in a hostile way, more like confused, cautious. My manager called me into his office before I even sat at my desk. He looked uncomfortable, then pulled up an email on his screen. The sender was some random address, not linked to any name I recognized, but the content hit me like a punch. It was a long, rambling message accusing me of cheating, being manipulative, and warning my coworkers to watch out for me. It was written in a strange tone, overly emotional, almost like a diary entry. At the bottom, there were screenshots of our early conversations, things Artem and I had messaged each other when everything seemed normal, twisted around, made to look like I'd been leading him on and lying. I had no idea how he found my work email, but clearly he had been digging. The worst part was, he had sent it to multiple people in the office. I felt sick. I explained everything to my boss, told him about Artem, how we met, how things escalated, and that I had blocked him, but he kept finding ways to contact me. He listened, then asked for any proof I had. I pulled out my phone and showed him the messages, the voicemails, the creepy accounts. He nodded slowly and said, "You need to report this. This is harassment." I agreed. I was angry, embarrassed, and tired of hiding. This wasn't just creepy messages anymore. He was trying to ruin my life. After work, I sat down and went through all my accounts. I changed every password, tightened every security setting. I deleted any old posts that mentioned places I visited, any hint of where I might be at a given time. I turned off location settings and stopped posting altogether. It felt like locking myself in a virtual room. I printed everything, emails, messages, call logs, and stored it all in a folder. My friends helped, encouraging me to go to the police. I realized I couldn't manage this alone anymore. Artem had crossed a line, and I didn't know what he'd do next. A few days later, my best friend and I went to the police station together. I wasn't sure what to expect, but they took it seriously. I told them everything, gave them all the printed evidence, even the audio files from his voicemails. One of the officers went through it, asking questions, marking things. They said I could file an official complaint, and that if they found enough cause, they could place a restraining order on him. I didn't feel better exactly, but at least I was doing something. About a week later, they called me in again. They had contacted Artem for a formal meeting. Apparently at first, he denied everything, said he didn't know what I was talking about. But when they showed him some of the messages, he admitted to sending a few of them. He said it was because of strong feelings, that he was just hurt and didn't know how to handle it. I guess he tried to act like it was some tragic love story. The officers didn't buy it. They told him he was now officially prohibited from contacting me in any way. No texts, no emails, no calls, nothing. If he tried, it would be a criminal offense. Hearing that gave me some relief. At least now there were legal consequences if he continued. But in the back of my mind, I kept thinking, what if that doesn't stop him? Some people don't care about rules. Obsession can push people past logic, past fear of punishment. I started avoiding places we had ever talked about. I didn't go out alone at night. I kept my phone on silent but checked it constantly, expecting to see some new account or number pop up. I wasn't sleeping well. Then, like someone flipped a switch, he disappeared. No more messages, no calls, no email spam. My social media stayed quiet. He didn't try to break into any accounts, didn't show up anywhere near my work or home. Nothing. Weeks went by, and then months. I still don't know if he got scared of being arrested or just lost interest. Maybe the reality of getting caught was finally enough. Either way, the silence felt strange. I thought I'd feel safe again, but I didn't. I jump every time I get a message from an unknown number. Even a random friend request makes my heart race until I check who it is. I still keep all my profiles locked down, and I don't share anything personal online anymore. It's like I'm always looking over my shoulder, waiting for him to try again. Maybe he won't. Maybe he found someone else to focus on. But that thought doesn't help. It only makes me wonder if he's doing this to someone else now. The worst part about all of it is how fast things went from normal to dangerous. 1 minute you're just chatting with someone, thinking maybe you'll meet for coffee. Then suddenly your private life is public, your job's at risk, and you're afraid to open your door. I don't trust people easily now. That app is long deleted. I barely even talk to strangers online anymore. You never really think something like this can happen until it does, and when it's over, it doesn't feel like it's really over. You just live with it, constantly checking, constantly waiting. Working as a waitress in a small cafe gave me steady money and the chance to meet a lot of different people. Most of the regulars were friendly enough, a few kept to themselves, and some liked to chat. One guy stood out early on, but not in a bad way at first. He was polite, always greeted me with a smile, and left generous tips, sometimes more than the bill itself. He'd ask how my day was going, and I figured it was just him being nice. Some customers like to make small talk. It's part of the job. He would come in late evenings, usually an hour before closing. He always sat at the same table near the window, ordered light food, a sandwich, soup, or coffee, and stayed until I was finishing my shift. At first, I didn't notice a pattern. I'd serve his order, he'd eat quietly, maybe scroll through his phone or watch people out the window. Then, if I got a short break, he'd sometimes offer to bring me something from the bakery next door. "You've been on your feet all day. You should eat something," he'd say. It didn't feel wrong, just a little personal for someone I only knew from work. But I brushed it off. Everything seemed normal until one night he left a note on a napkin. I was cleaning the table after he left, and there it was, written in neat block letters. "I know when you finish today." I stood there holding it for a second. The schedule is posted on the board by the kitchen. Anyone could see it, staff or customer, so I thought maybe he'd just looked at it. Maybe he meant nothing by it. Still, something about that note didn't sit right with me. I threw it away and told myself I was overthinking. The next few days, he didn't show up. Then, maybe 4 days later, he came back like nothing happened. Same table, same small talk. I watched him a bit closer this time. He didn't act any different. When he left, I checked the table again. No note. I felt relieved, thinking maybe I was imagining things until a week later, when he came in again and left a message inside the bill folder. "I saw you use the back door last Thursday." That time, I froze. There was no way he could have known that unless he was watching. The staff sometimes used the back exit to avoid the crowds out front. It led to a small alley with dumpsters and connected to the parking lot. On Thursdays, I closed, and I used that door to avoid the usual crowd from the bar next door. It wasn't a secret, but I had only started using it recently, and it wasn't visible from the street. My stomach dropped when I read that. I kept the receipt, folded it, and shoved it in my pocket. That night, I walked out through the front door and took a longer way home, constantly looking over my shoulder. He wasn't outside. At least I didn't see him. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. At home, I stared at the note again and thought about showing it to my manager or the police. But what could I say? He hadn't threatened me. It was just strange. Creepy, yeah, but not illegal. I decided to just keep my eyes open and be more careful. After that, I noticed he always stayed until the end of my shift. Not just sometimes. Every time he came in, he wouldn't leave until I was locking up. And when I walked to the back to get my things, I'd often spot him moving toward the exit, almost in sync with me. He'd act casual, maybe wave goodbye if we crossed paths. But he was always just a few steps behind me, or leaving right after me. It didn't feel random. One night, I left the cafe, taking the front door just to be safe, and walked quickly down the street. I passed by a row of closed shops, and when I glanced back, I thought I saw someone a block behind. It was dark, and I couldn't be sure it was him, but I didn't want to find out. I crossed the street, took a different route than usual, and cut through a small park. I didn't see him again that night, but the next day, something else happened. I was walking home, earlier than usual because I swapped shifts with another waitress. It was still light out, and I felt a bit more relaxed. As I turned onto my street, I saw a car parked a little ways down, maybe 3 houses from mine. I didn't think much of it until I got closer and realized it looked like his car. Silver sedan, slightly rusted on one side, with a cracked side mirror. I slowed down, but didn't stop walking. I glanced at the driver's seat. No one was inside, but the engine was still warm when I walked past. I could hear the faint ticking sound. I didn't go straight to my house. I kept walking, made a loop around the block, and checked again. The car was gone. I stood there on the corner, unsure what to do. Had he followed me? Or was it just a coincidence? It could have been someone else's car. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't. That night, I didn't sleep much. I kept listening for sounds outside, cars passing, footsteps. Nothing happened, but it felt like something was about to. I wanted to ask someone at work if they'd noticed anything weird about him, but I didn't want to sound paranoid. Maybe I was imagining the whole thing, but every time he showed up, it got harder to believe it was just me overthinking. The last straw was a week later. I was closing up, wiping tables, stacking chairs. I looked out the window and saw his car parked across the street, engine running. He wasn't inside the cafe, hadn't ordered anything. Just sitting there, lights off, waiting. A couple of weeks later, he pushed it further. One evening, after his usual quiet visit, I went to clear the table and found another note. This time it was on a small, folded piece of paper, not a napkin. It read, "You smile beautifully at 10 p.m. when your shift ends." My shift had indeed ended at 10 that night, and I had smiled, maybe at a joke from a coworker, maybe just out of relief that the day was over. But the fact that he noticed and made a point to write it down made my skin crawl. That wasn't just being polite. He had to be watching closely, and at the exact moment, I walked out. I took the note straight to the manager. He listened carefully and didn't treat it like some silly misunderstanding. He took it seriously, which helped me not feel so alone in it. After reading the note, he suggested I start leaving only through the front entrance, and always with someone else from the team. There were no security cameras at the back lot, and it was dark at night, with barely any streetlights. The idea of walking out there alone again didn't seem smart. I agreed to the new plan. For the next few days, I followed that routine. I made sure I never went out alone, always asked someone to walk with me, and stuck to the front exit. Things seemed calmer, but that didn't last. One night, after closing, I was collecting trash from the back hallway near the rear door. It wasn't my job that night, but I was helping out a newer girl. I peeked through the window near the door just out of habit, and there he was, in his car, on the far side of the back lot. He'd backed into a spot, headlights off, just sitting there. I didn't wait. I turned around and walked fast to the front, found my manager still counting the register, and told him. He dropped what he was doing and went to check. By the time we returned to the back, the car was still there, same spot, engine off. My manager told me to stay inside and went out to get a closer look. The guy didn't get out. He just sat there, staring ahead, like he wasn't doing anything unusual. That's when the manager told me to call the police. That same evening, he called in a report to the local station, told them a man had been waiting outside the building, possibly stalking an employee. It wasn't a full emergency, but they sent a patrol car. While we waited, my manager stood outside, in plain view of the car, and I stayed just behind the door. The man didn't move. Then, maybe 5 minutes before the cops arrived, he pulled out slowly and drove off like nothing happened. No rush, no tire screeching, just a slow, calm exit like he'd been on his way out anyway. By the time the officers pulled up, he was already gone. I gave them his description, the car details, and showed them the notes I had kept. They said they couldn't do much unless he made a direct threat or tried to approach me again. But they logged it and promised to keep an eye out. They told me to call if I saw him again, even if he wasn't doing anything illegal. After that, I never left the cafe alone. My coworkers stepped up. Some offered to drive me home. Others waited with me outside for my ride. I didn't have a car, so I relied on buses. But even then, someone would walk with me to the stop. I didn't realize how important that would feel until I had people around me. For 2 weeks, he disappeared. No sightings, no notes, no car in the lot. I thought maybe the police visit had scared him off. Maybe he realized people were watching now, and he couldn't get away with it anymore. But then, one regular evening, he walked in again, like nothing had happened. Same table by the window. I saw him the moment he came through the door, and my whole body tensed. But he didn't look at me. Not once. He sat down, ordered a coffee from another server, barely touched it, and left after maybe 15 minutes. No note, no message, not even eye contact. It was like I didn't exist to him anymore. I didn't know if that was good or bad. Part of me hoped he had finally moved on. The other part couldn't shake the thought that this was just a pause before something worse. The fact that he didn't even glance my way made me more nervous, not less. I told my manager immediately, and we watched the footage from the cameras together, just to confirm his behavior. He was calm, deliberate, and gone before I even had a chance to react. From then on, I started keeping all the evidence, the napkin, the receipt with the note, a written log of every sighting. I wanted to be ready in case I needed to take legal action. My manager encouraged me to look into a restraining order, but the police had already said it would be tough without something more direct. A threat, a confrontation, something concrete. So far, all I had were notes and a man who seemed to know exactly how far he could push without breaking the law. The hardest part was not knowing. Not knowing if he was done, if he was still watching, if he'd try something else. Every night I worked a late shift. I felt like I was waiting for him to come back. Not seeing him didn't bring relief. It just meant I didn't know where he was or what he was planning. And the truth is, if one day he decides that watching isn't enough, I don't know who's going to stop him in time. I've always loved online games and forums where you could create a character and chat with people from all over the world. I wasn't super social in real life, so it felt nice to be someone else, even just for a bit. On one roleplay forum I joined about a year ago, there was this one guy. His username was kind of generic, something like RPG Knight 88. He started replying to my posts a lot. At first, it was all good. He would compliment my writing, respond with jokes, sometimes add little details to my character's backstory that actually made things more interesting. It felt harmless. We joked around, debated on fictional topics, talked about fantasy weapons and spells like nerds. Nothing deep. I replied when I had time, and sometimes we had a longer back and forth in threads. After about 2 weeks, he messaged me directly, said he liked my energy, and wanted to chat more outside the forum. He asked if I had Discord or Telegram. I was polite, and told him I preferred keeping forum stuff on the forum. He said he understood, even made a joke like, "Haha, I'm not a stalker, promise," and I brushed it off. But then he kept bringing it up. Every few days he'd find a reason to suggest we connect more directly. He started making comments like, "If we knew each other in real life, I think we'd be good friends," or "I feel like we're on the same wavelength." I didn't answer most of those comments, just kept things neutral. Then, one night, he made a post that was way more personal. It was in character, kind of, but he used phrases I'd written in private messages or threads weeks before. Stuff that wasn't part of the roleplay world. It creeped me out a bit. I responded vaguely, trying to move the topic back into game-related stuff. He messaged again saying, "I think we're past the character stuff now, don't you?" I didn't respond. A few days later, he asked again for my telegram. When I said no, this time more directly, he replied with just, "All right." But the next day, his tone changed. He was colder, less playful, still writing to me, but with these clipped, sarcastic comments like, "Guess some people like walls between them," or "You're not who I thought you were." I thought if I gave him space, he'd get over it. I muted his messages on the forum and stopped replying for a while, but he didn't stop. He kept posting replies in the same threads I was active in, tagging my character unnecessarily, inserting himself into every interaction. It wasn't aggressive yet, just irritating. A week later, he sent me a message saying he was done pretending. He said he was bored with playing games and wanted something more real. He said he felt I owed him honesty because of the connection we had. I didn't answer. I thought ignoring it would be the best way to end it. Then the weirdest thing happened. I got an email on my personal Gmail. I don't use that email for any of my online stuff. The subject line just had my username. Inside, it was a short message. "You shouldn't have lied. No name, no sender info, nothing else." My heart dropped. I hadn't shared that email with anyone on the forum. I double-checked my profiles to see if I'd accidentally posted it somewhere, but it wasn't there. I tried to stay calm, but a few days later, I got a telegram message from an unknown number. No profile picture. Just a message saying, "This you?" Followed by an old photo of me from high school. One I remembered from a private Facebook album that wasn't even public. I froze. That picture was never online under my current username. It didn't make sense. The photo was grainy, taken at some family barbecue. I hadn't even used that Facebook in years. The next message came in the same chat. It listed my university's name. Then, a few hours later, I got another message. 3 names. My mom's, my younger sister's, and my cousin's. First and last. I stared at my phone for a while before blocking the number. I couldn't figure out how he got any of it. I felt sick. I reopened the forum and checked our message history. It was gone. He'd deleted everything from his side. His account was still there, still active in other threads, but there was no trace of our messages. I couldn't report what I couldn't prove. The next morning, a manila envelope was in my mailbox. No return address. Inside, printed photos. More old ones from my deleted Facebook. One of my house from the street. I live in a shared rental, so the front looks generic, but I knew the angle was recent. I checked the timestamp printed on the photo corner. 2 days ago. My name was handwritten on the back in blue ink. I rushed to delete old profiles and accounts, changed every password I could think of. Email, social media, even my school portal. I messaged the forum admin, explained everything, and asked them to ban him. They responded within a day and said they'd take care of it. His original account disappeared. I felt a little relief, but within a week, I started getting weird replies again. Same forum, different usernames. The tone was almost identical, sarcastic, needling, using phrases that sounded too familiar. Some of the new accounts messaged me directly, referencing past conversations like they knew me. The admins banned those accounts too, but more kept showing up. It was like trying to plug holes in a leaking pipe. In one of the games we both used to play, a new character joined our server. At first, I didn't think much of it, but that player started reacting to my actions in ways that felt too personal. They'd show up in areas I was in, type things like, "Looks like someone's not hiding very well," or "Still pretending." I blocked and reported, but that didn't stop it. A few of my online friends noticed and said it looked like someone was stalking me in-game. Eventually, I started leaving. I quit the forum, stopped logging into the game, left Discord groups tied to those communities. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. I just vanished. I was scared, but mostly I felt defeated. This hobby had been a big part of my life for years, and now it felt poisoned. I didn't even know his real name, but he clearly knew too much about me. It felt like he was trying to erase me from the spaces where I used to feel safe. Then the real-life stuff got worse. I started getting letters again. Not emails, actual paper letters. No return address, typed out, a few lines each time. The first one said, "Would be a shame if you never showed up to class again." I threw it out immediately. The second one said, "Maybe we'll run into each other near the library." My dorm didn't have individual mailboxes. All the letters were dropped into a shared bin at the front desk. Anyone could have left them there. I stopped going out alone. I changed my walking routes. I started wearing a hoodie and a mask more often, even when I didn't need to. Every time someone made eye contact with me too long on the street, I wondered if it was him. I stopped posting anything online, even under different usernames. I deleted old Reddit accounts, old pictures from random sites, even an ancient Pinterest I hadn't used in years. I didn't want to give him any more ways to connect dots. Still, he seemed to know things he shouldn't. One message came through an anonymous email address. "I miss your voice." I'd never used voice chat on the forum. I hadn't sent any voice notes or anything like that. I didn't even know what he was referring to. Friends told me to go to the police. But what would I say? That someone I never met, whose real name I didn't know, was harassing me. That he found old photos, sent vague threats, and might be on campus. I didn't have proof. I kept everything I could, screenshots, emails, pictures, but it still felt flimsy. One night I had a small panic attack after hearing a knock on the window of the laundry room while I was doing clothes late. I didn't see anyone outside, probably nothing, but I couldn't sleep that night. I kept the lights off and sat by the door with a kitchen knife beside me. I knew it was getting to me, and part of me thought about leaving town completely, dropping out for a semester, moving in with a cousin in another city. But that would mean giving up more of my life. I deleted everything instead, all the accounts. Every game profile, every forum post, anything that could be tied back to my usernames. I changed to a new email, this time using a name no one would connect to me. I didn't tell anyone where I went online, and I didn't return to any of the communities I used to be part of. A few weeks later, I got one more message, this time in a public chat room I barely used anymore. A new user pinged me directly. "You think this ends just because you run?" That account was banned within the hour, and the mods promised to look into it, but I knew the pattern. He always found a way back. That was the last time he contacted me directly. Eventually, the messages stopped. The letters stopped. No more photos, no more usernames. Maybe he got bored. Maybe he moved on to someone else. I didn't feel relief. I felt numb. Time passed. I started building a new online life. Quiet, anonymous, away from all the places I used to be. But I never went back to roleplay forums. Not once. The thought of it still makes my stomach tense up. I keep my profiles locked down, never share personal info, and I assume everyone is watching. That used to sound paranoid. Now it just feels like basic safety. Sometimes I think about how it all started. Just some guy replying to my posts, pretending to be friendly. And how I didn't even notice when it turned into something else. I don't think I'll ever really go back to the way things were. There's still this low, constant hum in my head like something's waiting to start again. Even now, when a package arrives late or I see a stranger standing too long outside my building, I wonder if he's still watching. I finally managed to rent my own apartment in a big residential building with a small shared courtyard and a parking lot in the back. It wasn't anything fancy, just a clean one-bedroom on the 3rd floor, but it felt good to have my own space. No roommates, no shared kitchens, no waiting for the shower. Just quiet, my things where I left them, and that little sense of freedom I've been working toward for years. The first few weeks were normal. I unpacked, bought some furniture, met a couple of neighbors in the hallways. Most were polite but kept to themselves, which I didn't mind. One guy lived directly below me, mid-30s, quiet voice, always nodded when we passed each other. He helped me once when I was dragging groceries up the stairs. Just a quick, need a hand, and carried the heavier bag without much small talk. I thanked him, he smiled and walked off. There was something a little off about him, though. Nothing you could point to, really. Just the way he looked at me sometimes. Not rude or creepy outright, just like he was watching a little too long, like he was trying to figure something out. I caught him glancing up at my window once from the courtyard while smoking, but when he saw me, he looked away fast and went inside. Still, I told myself not to overthink. New place, new faces. I wasn't used to the environment yet. Maybe I was just being overly cautious. But then small things started to make me uneasy, like the sound of footsteps in the stairwell that would pause outside my door at random hours. Not often, just every once in a while late at night. Long enough to make me stop what I was doing and hold my breath. The footsteps wouldn't continue down or up. They'd just stop. Then after maybe 30 seconds, I'd hear them retreat. I brushed it off the first time. Maybe someone forgot something or was checking if they locked their door. But it happened again a few days later, and that time it was at 2 a.m. I stayed still, lights off, listening. No knock, just silence. Then slow, careful steps going back down. It was around then that I started double-checking the lock every night, making sure the windows were shut tight even if it was hot. I even moved a small table in front of the front door before bed, not to block it completely, but just enough that it would make a sound if someone tried coming in. One morning, I opened the door to grab a food delivery I'd scheduled, and there was a small folded paper on my doormat. No envelope, no name. Just folded in half like a note passed in school. I picked it up and opened it. It said, "You sang beautifully last night." I just stood there for a second, not moving. I hadn't had anyone over. I hadn't sung loud. If I sang at all, it was while taking a quick shower, soft and absent-mindedly. The idea that someone heard that, remembered it, and wrote about it was weird enough. But the tone of the note, too personal, like we'd shared a moment, I didn't like it. At first, I assumed maybe it was a prank, maybe one of the younger neighbors messing around, or some guy with a weird sense of humor. But there was no smiley face, no name, nothing casual about it. I tossed it and told myself it was probably nothing, just a neighbor with too much time on their hands. 3 days later, there was another note. This one was more direct. "The green robe suits you." That one hit me harder. I wore that robe only in the mornings, before getting dressed for the day. Light material, nothing fancy. But I wore it inside my apartment, and usually just in my bedroom or walking to the kitchen. The only time I might have been visible from outside was if I forgot to fully close the curtains in the living room, and even then, just for a second while passing by. I started thinking about the windows, the angle of view from other apartments. There were buildings on the other side of the courtyard. If someone in one of those rooms had binoculars, or even just a clear line of sight, they could have seen more than I realized, especially if they were watching regularly. Not just a quick glance, but really watching. I began testing the sight lines. I opened the curtain during the day and stood in different spots to see what parts of my apartment were exposed. The living room, definitely. Part of the hallway. Depending on the time of day and light, even my bedroom door if it was open. I felt stupid for not noticing earlier. I went out to the courtyard and looked back up at my window. From there, I could clearly see into my unit if the curtains were even a little open. It made me feel sick thinking someone had been watching from out here. That night, I kept the windows fully closed and the curtains tight. I checked every lock twice. I didn't sleep well. Every creak of the floor above or door slamming down the hall made me freeze. Around midnight, I thought I heard whispering near my door, but it was faint and stopped too quickly to be sure. I stayed in bed and didn't move. The next morning, I walked out to grab my mail and found another note. This one was different. It was taped to my door, right above the handle. In neater handwriting than before, it read, "You look better without the robe." That evening when I got home, there was something lying flat on my doormat. It wasn't a note this time. It was a photograph. It looked like it had been taken at night, grainy and a bit blurry, but the subject was clear. It was my window. The curtains were just slightly open, maybe 2 or 3 centimeters, and behind the glass was a shadowy shape. My shape. I recognized the angle. It was from across the courtyard, maybe from the building opposite or a balcony nearby. The lighting, the outline, even the way I was standing, it all lined up. Whoever took this had been watching at just the right time and waited for the right moment to snap the picture. My hand was shaking holding it. I stood there for a while, then went back inside and locked the door. I sat down at the kitchen table, photo still in my hand, and stared at it. This wasn't some note. This was proof someone had a camera pointed at my window. Someone had been looking in, timing it, taking pictures. Not just watching, but documenting. I called the police. My voice cracked once, but I kept it short and direct. I told them I found something disturbing left at my door. A photo someone took of me through my window. They came within half an hour. 2 officers, 1 male and 1 female. They examined the photo and asked a few questions. I explained how I'd received notes before, how I thought someone might be watching me. They said it was disturbing, yes. But the photo didn't show a face. It didn't show who took it, or even exactly where it was taken from. There wasn't enough evidence to accuse anyone directly. I mentioned the neighbor below me, how he acted strange sometimes, how he always seemed to be around. They said they'd talked to him, along with the others in the building. I watched from the peephole later that night. One of the officers knocked on his door. He answered calmly, spoke with them for a few minutes. They didn't stay long. After they left, he stepped out into the hallway, looked up toward my floor, then went back in and shut the door. Quiet. Normal. Like nothing happened. But something had definitely changed for me. There was no going back to normal after that. Over the next few days, I noticed him more. My downstairs neighbor. Every time I stepped out, I caught him near the stairs, or looking through the crack in his door. Just enough to see who was passing by. Once, I was checking my mailbox, and when I turned around, he was already standing at the foot of the stairs. He gave me a smile, tight, forced, and said, "Everything okay up there?" I just nodded and kept walking. I didn't want to answer. I didn't want to start anything, but I could feel it, the way his eyes didn't leave me as I climbed the stairs. That smile didn't reach his eyes. It never had. Inside my apartment, I started keeping every window covered at all times. I bought thick blackout curtains and made sure not even a sliver of light escaped. I stopped turning the lights on when it got dark, just used a small desk lamp that didn't reach the windows. I unplugged everything that could be used to spy. No smart TVs, no camera on my laptop. I taped over the peephole. I barely cooked anymore, just microwaved stuff and ate standing in the hallway where no window could catch me. Even like that, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching. I'd wake up in the middle of the night convinced I'd heard something. Sometimes tapping, sometimes creaking near the window. I started sleeping with my phone in my hand, flashlight ready. My place didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like I was being hunted in it. The police hadn't followed up after that one visit. I called again once, but they said they didn't have anything new. No one admitted to leaving the notes or the photo, and there were no cameras in the hallways of the building. Unless someone actually tried to break in, there wasn't much they could do. My friends kept telling me to leave, that it wasn't worth the stress. I didn't want to break my lease, but they said the money wasn't worth what was happening. One friend even offered to help me move. I hesitated, hoping things would stop on their own. But deep down, I knew they wouldn't. One night, I woke up around 3 a.m. to the sound of footsteps again. Slow, soft, right outside my door. I stayed completely still, barely breathing. Then the sound of someone lightly pressing on the door handle, just testing it. A second later, silence. No knock, no voice, just silence. The next morning, I decided I was done. I didn't wait for the end of the lease. I called a moving service, packed everything I could in 2 days, and took a new place across the city. Smaller, not as nice, but the windows were high and narrow, and there was no shared courtyard. No line of sight. I gave up my deposit without argument. I didn't care anymore. I just wanted to be gone. On the day I left, while sitting in the moving truck, engine running, I got a text. Just 5 words. "Why are you running away?" It came from an unknown number. No name, just those words. I didn't reply. I didn't save the number. I deleted the message and within the hour went to the store and bought a new SIM card. Changed my number that same day. Since then, I don't live in big buildings. I avoid places with balconies, shared spaces, or floor-to-ceiling windows. I check every apartment in person, walk the whole area before signing anything. I don't let my guard down, not even for a second. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I stayed, if I ignored the signs, dismissed the fear. I don't let my mind go too far with that thought, because whatever it was, I think it was building up to something worse. When I lost my job, my savings started draining fast. I was applying to everything, cafes, offices, anything, but nothing worked out. One night, while venting to my friend over text, she mentioned this closed content platform where people post pictures and followers pay for access. I didn't know much about it, just thought it was some influencer thing. She explained more, said I wouldn't need to show anything explicit if I didn't want to. She even said she'd been doing it for a few months and it helped her cover rent. I hesitated for a few days, but the next time I checked my bank balance, I made an account. At first, I kept it simple. Some soft, aesthetic pictures, nothing showing my face. Just cozy lighting, some mirror selfies, pictures and oversized sweaters. It felt a bit awkward, but people started subscribing. A few even tipped. I didn't say much, just short captions, a few emojis. After a few weeks, I had around a dozen regular subscribers. Most stayed quiet, but some commented. One of them stood out. His username was just random letters and numbers, but his tone was always polite. Nice lighting. Beautiful composition. You have great taste in decor. I didn't think much of it. I answered with emojis or a quick thank you. I made it a rule not to give away personal details. No names, no cities, no identifying stuff. But over time, he started asking little questions. First, it was harmless. What camera I used, what time of day the lighting looked best. Then it shifted. Where do you live? North or south-facing window? Is that the city skyline in the distance? I stayed vague. Just said things like, not sharing location, or just an old phone camera. He didn't press hard at first. One evening, I posted a picture from my balcony, just my legs in socks, a cup of tea, and a corner of the sky. It got more likes than usual. He commented, "That view looks familiar. Are you near downtown?" I ignored it. But a few days later, he brought it up again, asking if I lived near a certain street. I didn't respond. I thought maybe he was guessing, just making conversation. Still, I started cropping more of the background out of my shots after that. About a week later, he asked what floor I lived on. Said he was curious about the lighting angle, whether it was morning or evening sun. I didn't answer. He asked again the next day. That's when I felt something off. It wasn't just curiosity. It felt like he was collecting pieces of something. I replied, "Thanks for your support, but I don't discuss personal stuff." Left it at that. He didn't reply to that comment, but the next night, I saw his name pop up in the community chat. The platform had a group chat feature for subscribers. I usually didn't go there much, but this time, he tagged me directly. "Hey, love your new post today. Would love to talk sometime." Others saw it, but no one said anything. I just closed the app. Then he started messaging more often. Not in a creepy tone, just friendly. Too friendly. "What are you doing tonight? Do you ever go to the coffee shop near 11th and Main?" I never mentioned that place anywhere. My stomach dropped a little. I didn't reply. A few days passed. Then he messaged me directly and said, "I know this is weird, but I've followed you for weeks now. I feel like we'd get along in person. I'd pay you just to meet for coffee. Nothing weird. Just to talk." I read the message 3 times. I didn't answer right away. It wasn't aggressive, just wrong. Too much. I waited until the next morning, then finally replied, "I'm not comfortable with that. Please don't ask again." I blocked him right after. I thought that was it. About a week later, I noticed a guy in a hoodie standing near the entrance to my building. He wasn't doing anything, just kind of lingering near the door like he was waiting for someone. I tried not to look at him too much as I passed by. Maybe he was waiting for a delivery or an Uber or something, I thought. I went to the store and stayed out for a bit longer than usual. On my way back, I saw him again. Same spot, same hoodie, still not going inside. I walked past quickly, pretending to check something on my phone, but I had a bad feeling in my chest. It didn't feel like coincidence. The next morning, I stepped out onto the balcony to water the plants. While turning to reach the watering can, I caught sight of someone standing near the building across the street. It was him. Same build, same hoodie. He wasn't staring directly at me, but he kept glancing up in my direction, like he was trying to act casual and still keep watch. I stepped back inside quickly. That's when it hit me. I thought back to the pictures I had posted before. Some of them clearly showed the shape of my balcony railing, the pattern on the building's bricks, the windows across from mine. One shot even had part of the street sign blurred in the distance. At the time, I didn't think it was enough to pinpoint a location. Now I realized I had given too many pieces of the puzzle away, and someone had put them together. I sat down and scrolled through my old posts. There were more clues than I wanted to admit. Angles, light direction, buildings in the background. It wasn't much, but clearly it had been enough. I panicked. I shut the balcony door, locked it, and pulled the curtains closed. I felt exposed in my own home. That evening, I deactivated my profile and started deleting every photo I had uploaded. I sent a message to the platform's admin, asking them to wipe my page and remove any backups, if they kept those. They said they would get back to me within 48 hours. But I knew it was already too late. If he found my building once, deleting photos wasn't going to undo that. 2 days later, around 8 p.m., I heard the intercom buzz. I froze. Then it buzzed again, and again, non-stop, moving from one apartment number to the next. I muted the speaker, crouched near the wall, and listened. A few seconds passed. Then I heard a voice, muffled but clear enough, through the hallway speaker. "Hello? Can someone let me in? I have business with the girl from the top floor. It's urgent." My heart was pounding. I didn't move. A few neighbors responded through the intercom, asking who he was. He didn't give a name. One man said, "We don't open the door to strangers. Leave." Then silence. A minute later, I heard the entrance door rattle, like someone trying the handle without a key. Eventually, the noise stopped. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound in the hallway made me sit up. Every shadow outside the window made me twitch. The next morning, I packed a bag, called a cab, and went straight to my friend's place across the city. I told her everything. She was shocked, but told me I did the right thing. She offered her couch for a few nights. I didn't argue. That day, I logged into my account one last time. I changed the profile name to something random, deleted the bio, removed the profile picture, and wiped every post. I sent a final message to the few followers still active, saying the page was shut down and no future content would be posted. I blocked everyone after sending the message, just in case. That evening, lying on a couch that wasn't mine, I thought about how this all started. I just wanted to pay my bills. It was supposed to be a simple way to stay afloat. I never imagined it could turn into someone standing outside my building, buzzing random doorbells, trying to get inside. I stayed at my friend's place for a full week, didn't check the platform, didn't go near my apartment. I turned off notifications for everything and only checked emails twice a day. When I finally returned home, the street was quiet. No one was standing near the door. Still, I looked over my shoulder 3 times before going in. Since then, I've kept the curtains closed more often. I don't post anything personal online anymore. No photos from home, no hints, no casual shots with backgrounds. I even bought a second lock for the front door and installed a small camera above it. He never came back, not that I saw. Maybe he moved on. Maybe he realized I was gone. But even now, whenever I see someone waiting near the entrance who I don't recognize, my whole body tenses up. It's not paranoia. It's just what happens after you let the wrong person see too much. I needed to fix the drain in my bathroom, and I didn't want to deal with calling around, so I used one of those apps where you can hire local handymen. Found a guy with solid reviews, profile picture looked normal, nothing weird. His messages were polite, used full sentences, didn't pressure me or anything. We set a time for the next afternoon. He confirmed again that morning, said he'd be there by 2 p.m. He rang the doorbell right on time. Late 30s maybe, dark hoodie under a work jacket, jeans, tool bag in one hand. He gave me a small smile, not overly friendly, but polite. His eyes moved around a lot. I noticed it right away, but didn't think much. Maybe he was just taking in the place like any worker does before starting a job. I pointed him to the bathroom down the hall, told him the sink drain wasn't draining right. He nodded, walked over, and started unpacking his tools. I stayed in the living room, scrolling through my phone. Every few minutes I'd hear him rattling tools or turning the faucet on and off. He called out once asking how long the clog had been a problem. I told him a couple weeks, just got worse recently. He joked, "You got someone losing hair in this house?" I laughed a bit and said, "No, it's just me here." He said, "Ah," in a way that made me pause for a second, like he was filing that away. But again, I brushed it off. Just small talk. He worked fast, maybe 30 minutes tops. Said it was mostly build-up, nothing major. He had a small flashlight and mirror, the kind plumbers use. I stood nearby when he was cleaning up. He seemed to be looking past me a lot, not directly at me. His eyes kept flicking to the hallway behind me, like he was trying to remember something about it. When he packed up, I thanked him, paid through the app, and walked him to the door. He stood in the entryway a moment, kind of slow to leave. Then he said, "Nice place. Feels quiet here." I said thanks, didn't really respond beyond that. He gave me a quick nod and walked out. I closed the door, locked it, and just sat back down on the couch. Didn't feel creeped out at the time. Just thought maybe he was the chatty type or something. Only thing I kept thinking about later was how often he glanced around. Like, he wasn't just noticing stuff, he was studying it. Eyes moving from door to hallway, hallway to ceiling, then the shelf in the corner. Just things you wouldn't normally pay attention to if you were just fixing a sink. Next day, I got up and was doing some cleaning. Nothing major, just laundry, vacuuming. I went into my bedroom and saw that my camera, one of those small security cams I keep on a shelf facing the window, was turned all the way toward the wall. That immediately struck me as off. I don't ever move it. It's on a little swivel base, but I always keep it pointed the same direction. The lens was now completely facing away from the room. It's not something that could just fall or rotate on its own. It clicks into place, kind of stiff when you move it. I checked if maybe it was a system update or something, but the app showed no changes. That's when I opened the playback. There's a small gap in the recording, just 5 or 6 minutes, but enough to be strange. Right after the guy finished in the bathroom, there's a moment where he walks out, and instead of heading straight for the front door, he goes into the hallway, pauses, then steps into my bedroom. He doesn't turn on the light. The footage is grainy but clear enough from the hallway cam. He's standing near the dresser. Then he looks toward the camera, tilts his head, steps closer, and that's when the feed cuts for a few minutes. When the feed resumes, he's walking out of the room and heading toward the front door. That's when he called out, and I walked over to meet him. So he went into my bedroom without asking, without saying anything, and spent several minutes in there with the camera conveniently knocked out of position. I sat on my bed just staring at the screen. He hadn't taken anything. Nothing looked disturbed. But now I couldn't stop thinking about it. Why go in there at all? Why touch the camera? Was he just being nosy? Or was he trying to see what was being recorded? Or worse, making sure something wasn't being recorded? I walked slowly back into the bedroom, stood in front of the shelf, and looked at the camera. The base had small scratches on it, like it had been rotated more forcefully than normal. I took a step back, scanned the room. Nothing looked different, but now everything felt wrong. A few days later, I started getting messages from an unknown number. They weren't aggressive at first, just weird. The person said they liked my photos online and asked if I was still living alone. That was the first red flag. I never gave out my phone number on any of my social media. I don't even use my full name there. I keep everything private. No check-ins, no tags with location, nothing that could easily link back to me. And I hadn't met anyone new lately, except for that guy. At first, I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but it didn't sit right. The messages were personal in a way that felt too specific. He mentioned things like the books on my shelf and said he liked the blue sweater I wore the other day. That exact sweater had been drying on a rack near the window. There's no way he could have seen it unless he was in the apartment. I went back to the footage again, rechecked every angle, but didn't find any obvious sign he'd come back. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling something was off. I contacted the support team on the app where I'd booked him. I wrote a detailed report, date, time, screenshots from the hallway cam, the moment he went into the bedroom, and a note about the strange messages I was now receiving. They replied the next day, said they'd look into it and take appropriate action, but I didn't really believe it would lead to anything. He hadn't technically committed a crime. No theft, no forced entry. I asked if they had other complaints about him, but they said they couldn't share that information. That same night, I checked every room in my apartment. I opened every drawer, flipped through my books, checked the smoke detectors, the light fixtures, looked for anything that didn't belong, nothing obvious. I pulled the camera off the shelf and inspected it. Still worked, no tampering that I could see. But it stayed in my head. What if he planted something small? A bug? A mic? I wasn't even sure what to look for. That was when I decided I needed to file a police report, even if they wouldn't do anything right away, just to have it documented. The next morning, I went to the nearest station, told them everything from start to finish. The officer listened carefully but said it was still a gray area. He didn't steal anything, didn't threaten you, and there's no hard evidence he's the one messaging you, he said. I asked if they could trace the number. He said unless it escalated, they didn't have grounds to request that kind of search. Still, I insisted on filing a report. I gave them the number, the screenshots, the app details, everything. They wrote it up, said they'd add it to their system, and told me to be cautious. I left feeling frustrated but slightly more in control. I took action as soon as I got home. First thing, I replaced the lock on the front door. Not just a new key, but a different brand, more secure. I installed a door sensor, window sensors, and a motion detector near the entrance. I added 2 more cameras, one in the hallway and one in the kitchen facing toward the rest of the apartment. I activated audio recording on all of them and linked everything to cloud storage. Every angle now had coverage, and every camera had backup. I even bought a handheld bug detector from a store that sells surveillance counter gear. I didn't find anything suspicious, but I felt better just checking. My cousin came over and helped me mount everything properly. She offered to stay the night, but I said no. I wanted to know if anything happened when I was alone. The messages didn't stop immediately. A couple days later, another one came. If you ever need something else fixed, I'm just a call away. I didn't respond. The next day, I know you're home. I see the lights are on. That one got to me. I blocked the number immediately. I didn't reply to a single one. I didn't sleep much that night. I stayed dressed, phone in hand, staring at the monitor from the new cameras. Nothing happened. No motion alerts, no sound. Just silence. After that, he sent one more message from a new number. You don't have to be scared. I just thought we had a connection. I know you're alone. I blocked that number too and saved the message. I added it to the police report. But then, nothing. He stopped. No more messages, no weird calls, no signs of being watched. It was like he gave up. Maybe he saw I wasn't playing along. Maybe he realized I'd already talked to the police. Or maybe he moved on to someone else. I'll never know. The worst part is, He didn't break in, didn't leave fingerprints, didn't hurt me. But he still managed to mess with my sense of safety. All because I let a stranger into my apartment for a simple repair. Now I only book appointments when someone I trust can be there with me. My brother, a friend, even my neighbor if it's last minute. I watch the person work the entire time, never let them move freely through the place. If they ask to use the bathroom or check something in another room, I go with them. No exceptions. It's been months, and I still think about that first moment. The camera turned to the wall. That small thing, easy to overlook, was the first sign. Since then, I don't ignore signs. Doesn't matter how polite someone seems. That guy didn't yell, didn't act crazy. He smiled, made jokes, worked fast, but he watched everything. He learned I was alone. He found a way to follow me online, and he made it clear, without ever saying the words, that he could come back if he wanted to. That's all it takes. 1 hour inside your home. One person with the wrong intentions. 1 second where you're not paying attention. I usually hit the bar after work, just to relax and hang out with some friends. It's nothing wild, just a couple of beers, talking about work or sports. That one evening felt no different at first. The usual spot was a bit more crowded than normal, but I managed to find a stool near the end of the bar. I ordered a drink and was just scrolling through my phone when a girl slid into the seat next to mine. She smiled, raised her glass a little and said, "Mind if I join you?" I didn't see any reason to say no. She was friendly, talkative in a casual way, not pushy or anything. We got to talking, mostly light stuff, music, movies, how we both hated morning commutes. She laughed easily and seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say, which doesn't always happen. We stayed there talking for a couple hours. At some point, I noticed my friends had already left, but I didn't mind. She asked if I had Instagram, but I don't really use it, so she just said, "Let's swap numbers instead." I gave her mine, and she texted me right there to make sure I got hers. I went home thinking it was just a decent night out. Not the kind of thing you expect to turn into anything serious. The next morning, her name popped up on my screen around 8 a.m. The message just said, "Good morning." Nothing weird about that, so I replied something short like, "Morning, hope you have a good day." She texted back again maybe 5 minutes later, asking what I was doing that day. I told her I was heading to work. Then a few minutes after that, she asked what time I got off. Then what I usually do after work. Then if I wanted to meet again that evening. It was still early, and I was getting ready for a meeting, so I didn't reply right away. Maybe 20 minutes went by before I picked up my phone again. I already had 4 unread messages from her, one asking if everything was okay. I told her yeah, just got busy with work. She sent back a thumbs up emoji, and I didn't think more of it. But throughout the day, she kept texting. Every couple of minutes, sometimes just random stuff, sometimes questions about me. Like, "Do you usually hang out with girls at bars?" Or, "You seem different today." I tried to stay polite. Just gave short answers, said I had work to do. That night, I didn't go to the bar. I just went straight home. Around 9 p.m. she called. I let it ring out. She texted right after, "Sorry if I came on too strong, I just really liked last night." I told her it was fine and that I was just tired. She replied, "Okay, good night." Next day was more of the same. Good morning texts, then questions about what I was doing, who I was with. She started acting like we were already dating. When I mentioned I had plans that evening with a couple coworkers, she asked who was going and if any girls would be there. I told her it was just 2 guys from IT. That seemed to calm her down for a bit. 2 days later, she texted saying she wanted to meet my parents. Just dropped it in like that. Would love to meet your family sometime soon. Then a second message. And your friends. I feel like I should know the people around you. I didn't know how to answer right away. It wasn't just the speed of it. It was the way she made it sound like it was already decided. I told her, as gently as I could, that we'd only just met, and maybe we should take things a bit slower. She read the message almost immediately, but didn't reply for a while. When she did, it was one line. Why? Are you hiding something? I told her no, of course not. Then she started sending back these strange messages like, you seemed so real that night. I guess I was wrong. And I'm not the type of girl who chases liars. I asked her what she was talking about, but she just said, you'll see. I didn't reply after that. I figured she was upset and needed to cool off. But over the next few hours, she kept texting, paragraphs this time, saying I wasn't being honest, asking why I was avoiding her. I didn't respond. Around 6 p.m., my manager asked if I could stay late to help with a database issue. I agreed, glad to stay busy. About 45 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. I checked it and saw her name. She said she was outside. At first, I didn't understand what she meant, so I replied, where? She answered, your office. I need to talk to you. Now. When I told her we needed to take a break, she reacted like I'd betrayed her. I tried to keep it respectful, said we'd rushed into things and it'd be better for both of us to slow down. She read the message and didn't answer for hours. I thought maybe she finally understood. That night, around 10, I heard someone shouting outside my apartment. At first, I didn't realize it was her. The voice was yelling my name over and over, demanding I come down. I looked out the window and saw her standing right in front of the entrance, pacing, pointing at the building, yelling louder every minute. My neighbor from the third floor opened his window and shouted for her to shut up. She screamed back at him, saying it was none of his business, that I ruined her life and needed to come out and face her. She started yelling things that weren't even remotely true, that I told her we'd live together, that I said I wanted kids. She claimed I promised we'd get married in the summer. I stood behind my front door, frozen. We had gone out maybe twice in total. I never said anything like that, not even close. More neighbors came out into the hallway. Someone knocked on my door, quietly asked if everything was okay. I told them I was handling it. I didn't want to make a bigger scene. Eventually, I had to go down there. She was sitting on the steps, still talking to herself when I came out. When she saw me, she jumped up and started walking fast toward me. I motioned for her to calm down. Told her we couldn't do this out here. People were trying to sleep. I walked her to the corner of the street where it was darker and a little more private. She kept talking the whole time, fast and erratic, switching from saying she loved me to accusing me of lying about everything. Her face was tense, hands moving constantly. I tried to get her to sit down, but she wouldn't. I said again that we needed space. She laughed in this weird, sharp way and said, "You just want to disappear like I don't exist." I didn't say anything back to that. I waited until she stopped talking and asked if she could go home for the night. Eventually, she turned around and walked away, still muttering. I didn't sleep much after that. The next morning, I noticed something on the wall next to the entrance of my building. Big black letters sprayed across the surface. Swear words, insults, and my name written in all caps. She hadn't even tried to hide it. It was obvious who did it. A couple of neighbors were already gathered around, talking about calling the management company. One woman had already taken pictures. By noon, someone from the housing office had come by. Then the local officer showed up too. They asked if I knew who did it. I didn't lie, but I had to explain carefully. I told them I'd recently had a falling out with someone who'd been acting unstable. I didn't mention her name, just said she might have been responsible. Problem was, I didn't see her actually doing it. No cameras either. They said without proof, there wasn't much they could do. I spent the next couple of hours scrubbing the paint off the wall. The words didn't come off completely, so I had to buy a can of white paint to cover it. As I was finishing the last corner, I saw her again. She was just standing across the street, staring. When I looked up, she crossed over and started walking toward me. Her face was blank this time. Not angry. Not sad. Just blank. She said, "You left me. You said we were something, and now you throw me away." I didn't say anything. Just picked up the empty paint can and stepped back toward the door. She kept talking, saying I abandoned her, that she had no one now. I told her I was calling the police. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. As soon as she saw me dial, she turned around and walked away fast. She didn't run, but she moved quickly, disappeared around the corner before anyone showed up. That's when I decided I had to cut all contact. I blocked her number, deleted her messages, changed my privacy settings everywhere. I told my friends not to share anything about me online, especially not locations. I figured if I kept a low profile, it'd blow over. She couldn't keep this up forever. A week went by. No messages, no shouting, no surprise visits, nothing. It was weird. At first, I kept expecting her to pop up. I'd hesitate every time I went to the store or walked to the metro. I'd check around the corner before I left my building. But slowly, it went quiet. She didn't come back. My neighbors stopped asking. Life started feeling normal again. I changed my phone number completely just in case. I deleted the bar's location from all my apps and stopped going there. It was easier than wondering if she'd show up again. That one night, that one random conversation, turned into weeks of chaos. I never thought something like that could happen from just a couple drinks and some small talk. Since then, I keep my distance. I don't hand out my number to strangers anymore. I don't answer messages from people I barely know. It's not about being rude. It's about being safe. People show you who they are early on, and I ignored the signs. I didn't think someone could fall apart like that so fast. But she did. She disappeared. Just like that. No more calls, no more accusations, no more scenes in front of my door. But even though she's gone, I still catch myself checking the window before bed. Just in case. I work as a general practitioner in a small neighborhood clinic. It's the kind of place where people mostly come in with colds, minor cuts, back pain, and nothing too serious. Most of the patients are regulars, older folks, parents with kids, construction workers, shop employees. Usually, everything runs smoothly. You talk to the patient, do the checkup, maybe prescribe something or send them for tests. Then they leave, and that's it. Routine. But about 3 months ago, this woman started showing up. She first came in with mild pain in her side. I checked her, ran some basic tests. Nothing wrong. I gave her advice, told her to monitor it, and assumed that was that. A week later, she came again. This time she said she had dizziness that wouldn't go away. I remembered her face, of course. She was in her early 30s, well-dressed, very polite. She had this overly cheerful tone and smiled more than most patients do. Not in a strange way, just noticeably friendly. Again, I ran the standard checks. Her blood pressure was fine, blood sugar normal, no fever, nothing out of range. I told her to rest, maybe reduce screen time if she was getting migraines. She nodded a lot and thanked me like I'd done something major. After that, she started showing up weekly. One time it was nausea. Another time she said she felt numbness in her fingers. Then it was chest pressure, but not pain, just tightness, she said. None of the symptoms ever matched anything physical. All her test results came back clean. No infections, no inflammation, no deficiencies. I thought maybe it was stress-related, or anxiety, or even hypochondria. I've seen cases like that. People fixate on the idea that something's wrong even if their body's fine. It happens. What started to feel odd wasn't just her constant visits, though. It was the way she behaved. She always tried to talk longer than necessary, asked personal questions. How long had I worked there? Did I like my job? Was I married? She never crossed a line, but it was clear she wanted more of a conversation than most patients. I tried to keep it polite and professional, answered in short sentences, focused on her symptoms. Still, she came back, always with something new. Always sitting the same way in the chair, smiling, saying she hoped I remembered her. She dressed nicely every time, makeup done, hair neat. I began to wonder if maybe she was just lonely. Some people, especially those who live alone, use medical appointments as a way to talk to someone. I didn't want to assume anything, but after the 6th or 7th visit with no clear medical cause, I started paying closer attention to the patterns. Then I noticed she never booked random appointments. She always insisted on being scheduled specifically with me. The front desk staff mentioned it casually one day, saying, "She always asks for you. Says you're the only doctor who listens properly." I tried not to read into it too much. Told them to accommodate if my schedule allowed, but not to guarantee it. Next appointment, she showed up exactly on time. Said her lower back was hurting. Same routine. I asked questions. She answered vaguely. Didn't seem like real pain, but more like she was acting like it hurt. I checked anyway. Nothing abnormal. No inflammation. No tenderness. Her movements didn't match someone in discomfort. I documented everything as usual, but at that point, I felt like she was coming just to see me, not for any real medical reason. She started acting a little more casual, like we were friends. Said things like, "It's always so nice to see you," or, "You probably think I'm weird coming here all the time." I told her, as gently as I could, that if her symptoms weren't improving, we might need to refer her to a specialist, maybe neurology or psychiatry. She brushed it off, said she didn't trust specialists, said I was the only one she felt safe around. One afternoon, near the end of her appointment, she said, "I think about you every day, you know. You're probably the only one who understands me." She said it softly, like it was some shared secret. I paused. I didn't react much, just made a note and changed the subject. That crossed into territory I wasn't comfortable with. I wasn't rude, but I made it clear I was her doctor, not a friend. I told her, "If you're dealing with something more emotional, it might help to talk to someone who's trained for that. A therapist or psychologist." I said it calmly, matter of fact. I've referred many patients for mental health help before. It's routine. But she didn't like it. Her smile faded just a little. She didn't argue, though. Just nodded slowly, like she was pretending to agree. She left the room, and as I finished typing the notes in her file, I asked the front desk to flag her for a follow-up review. Standard when there are repeated visits with no diagnosis. About a month later, she came into the clinic looking completely different. Her face was pale, her hands shaking, and she was sweating through her clothes even though the weather was cool. She could barely stand. She stumbled to the front desk and collapsed right there on the floor before saying a word. I heard the commotion from down the hall and ran out immediately. It was her. Her breathing was shallow, her pulse weak. I called the in-house emergency team and started assisting while they arrived. We got her onto a stretcher and moved her into the emergency room. We started oxygen, got an IV line in, and monitored her vitals. After about 20 minutes, she started to regain consciousness. She looked around slowly, then locked eyes with me. She tried to speak, but her voice was raspy. I asked if she could remember what happened. She whispered that she had drunk something bad. When we pressed further, she eventually admitted she had swallowed a cleaning solution from under her sink, on purpose. When we asked why, she said she didn't want to die. She just wanted to feel something strong enough to be seen again. The room fell quiet for a few seconds. I felt cold, not from fear, but from the realization of how deep this went. She had harmed herself not to escape life or from despair, but just to get back into this clinic, back in front of me. That thought disturbed me more than anything else. She had risked her organs, her life, just to make sure I would be the one treating her again. This wasn't just some harmless flirtation or loneliness anymore. It was an obsession, a dangerous one. We stabilized her. She would need a stomach wash and overnight observation. While the nurses prepped the transfer, I stepped out and told the administrative lead what had happened. It couldn't be ignored anymore. The fact that she'd intentionally ingested poison with the hope of being brought back to me specifically, it wasn't just alarming, it was a serious liability. The administration acted quickly. They called in a clinical psychologist and contacted the police, given the nature of the self-harm and the potential risk to staff and herself. While she was still under care, she kept asking to see me. She cried when we told her someone else would be handling her case from now on. She said over and over, "Please don't send anyone. I just made a stupid mistake. I didn't mean to cause trouble." But by then, it was out of our hands. Later that day, we reviewed her patient history more thoroughly. We discovered that she had visited several other clinics in the last 2 years. In each case, she'd tried to develop personal relationships with male physicians. The pattern was almost identical: frequent visits, exaggerated symptoms, pushing for personal attention. In one instance, she had made a false claim about having a relationship with a doctor. That clinic had reported the issue but apparently dropped it after she moved out of their area. It was clear this wasn't new behavior. She was taken to a psychiatric unit for a full evaluation. It came back that she was suffering from a complex psychological condition involving obsessive attachment and delusional thinking. I wasn't told the full diagnosis, but the medical director confirmed she'd be held for further assessment and support. I was told to avoid contact and not respond to any letters or calls, if she attempted any. The whole situation left me unsettled. I hadn't done anything to encourage her, but somehow I'd ended up in the center of it. Just doing my job, showing basic empathy. It had been enough for her to fixate on me. I kept going back over every interaction in my mind, wondering if I could have done something differently. But everything I did was by the book. Still, the idea that someone could twist something so simple into something dangerous, it stayed with me. After that case, I changed how I worked. I became more aware of patterns in patient behavior. People who return too often, especially with vague complaints and emotional undertones, I flag them early now, not to judge, but to monitor for risk. We also changed how the clinic handles scheduling. No more patients choosing specific doctors without medical reason. Every request is reviewed by staff, and anything that looks unusual is escalated to a supervisor. I never saw her again. I don't know what happened after she was transferred. One of the nurses later said she was enrolled in some long-term rehabilitation program, but that's all I heard. I hope she got the help she needed. But after that experience, I couldn't help but feel different about my work. Every new patient, especially ones who seemed too eager or came back too often, made me hesitate a little. I don't mean to sound cold, but now I look for signs that someone might not just be here for a cough or sore throat. Sometimes they're here for something else entirely, something personal they can't explain, and if I don't notice it early enough, it can spiral. I learned that lesson the hard way, and I think about it more often than I'd like. I work at a fitness center, nothing fancy, just your standard gym with treadmills, free weights, and a few group classes. I run a handful of those classes: yoga in the mornings, strength training in the afternoon, and cardio circuits in the evening. Most of the people coming through are just trying to stay in shape, get healthier, maybe lose a few pounds. You get to know the regulars, the ones who show up every week like clockwork. But every now and then, someone stands out. Not because they're stronger or more skilled, but because something's off. That's what happened with her. She started showing up to every single class I taught. At first, I just thought she was motivated. Yoga at 7 a.m., strength class at 1 p.m., then cardio again at 6 p.m. Every day, same schedule. At first, it was fine. I've had people go hard before, especially if they're training for something. But after a while, I noticed she was pushing through pain in a way that didn't make sense. She'd wince during lunges or squats, sometimes even limping a bit between stations. She kept saying her knee was acting up. I pulled her aside one day after class and said, "Hey, you should really give that knee some rest. It's not worth making it worse." She smiled, nodded, said she'd take it easy, but the next day she was right back in class, pushing herself just as hard. After a few more days of the same thing, I brought it up again, more seriously this time. She laughed it off, said something like, "Pain just means it's working." I tried to explain it doesn't work that way, especially with joints, but she clearly wasn't listening. At first, I just figured she was stubborn. Some people don't want to hear advice, even when they pay for it. Maybe she had a goal, like an event or something, and didn't want to miss progress. I didn't press too hard because, technically, she wasn't breaking any rules. But something about it stayed in the back of my mind. It wasn't just the workouts. She was too consistent, too focused. But not on the exercises. On me. She started hanging around after the classes, waiting for me to finish cleaning up the mats or putting equipment away. At first, it was just casual stuff. Questions about technique, diet, stretching routines. Then she started asking more personal things. Did I have a girlfriend? Was I dating anyone? I told her politely that I didn't talk about personal stuff with clients. She laughed, said, okay, professional guy." But it didn't stop. A few days later, she brought it up again, joking that we should grab a coffee or dinner sometime, just to get to know each other outside the gym. I kept it professional, told her I didn't date clients, and I really meant that. It wasn't just a rule of the gym, it's something I stuck to for good reason. She didn't argue, but I could tell she didn't take the hint seriously. I noticed she'd start arriving early and leaving late, always finding a reason to be in the same hallway or near the locker rooms when I was there. Once, after I finished locking up one of the studios, I turned the corner to head toward the staff room, and she was just standing there in the hallway. No phone, no bag, just standing there like she was waiting for something, or someone. I asked if she was all right, and she just smiled and said, "I was hoping to catch you before you left." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded and walked past, muttering something about needing to finish up paperwork. From then on, I started watching my surroundings more. Kept my locker room visits short, took different routes through the gym if I could. Then one day, she showed up limping badly. Her knee looked swollen, and she was visibly in pain even just walking across the studio floor. I was about to ask her to sit this one out, but before I could say anything, she walked right up to me and said, "I want to be here, even if it hurts. I want to be near you." Then she smiled again, like that was the most normal thing in the world. A few days after that last conversation, I found a note on my windshield. It was early morning, maybe 6:30, and I was getting into my car to head to the gym. There was a small folded piece of paper stuck under the wiper. I opened it, thinking it was a flyer, or maybe something from the parking management. But it was a handwritten message. "You can't ignore me forever." No name, no signature. Just that. At first, I didn't know for sure who left it, but I couldn't stop thinking about her. She was the only one who had crossed that line between client and personal interest. The only one who had shown that kind of fixation. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but I couldn't shake the feeling. I didn't tell anyone right away. Just tried to move on, stay focused on work. But then it happened again. 3 days later, another note. Same paper, same handwriting. This time the tone changed. "If you keep pretending I'm not here, you'll regret it." I stood in the parking lot with the paper in my hand, heart beating hard, scanning the lot like someone might be watching. That's when I realized it wasn't just awkward or uncomfortable anymore. This was a problem. I went to the gym management and told them everything. The classes, the conversations, the waiting in hallways, and now the notes. They took it seriously. They said if it escalated again, they could bring in security. Suggested I go to the police, but also said it would be better to have something solid, evidence, before taking that step. I didn't really think it would come to that. I thought maybe it was just an emotional reaction. Someone getting too attached. Unstable, sure, but not dangerous. That's what I told myself. One night, about a week later, I was closing up the gym after my last class. It was dark outside, maybe 9:45 p.m. Just as I was locking the main door, one of the staff ran up to me and said there was a fire in the parking lot. Something about a car. I didn't think anything of it until he said, "I think it's yours." I sprinted outside. The smell hit me first. Burning rubber, smoke. Then I saw the flames. My car was engulfed. Fire was crawling up the sides, popping the tires. Black smoke rolling into the sky. Firefighters arrived fast and got it under control, but the damage was done. My car was destroyed. The front end was melted, windows shattered, interior torched. Standing there, watching it burn, I didn't feel anything at first, just cold. Someone from the gym mentioned checking the security cameras. That's when I knew. There was no more maybe. This wasn't random. Later that night, I sat with management and watched the footage. The camera caught someone walking across the lot in a hoodie, carrying something. They stopped by my car, crouched, and poured liquid over the tires. Then, they lit a match. Before leaving, they turned slightly, and the hood slipped just enough. You could see part of a face, not fully clear, but enough. Enough to know it was her. I took the footage straight to the police. They didn't hesitate. The car, the notes, the video, it was more than enough. They ran her name through the system. She was registered in the gym's client database. Phone number, address, everything. They found her in less than 48 hours. During the trial, it all came out. She had a documented psychological disorder, some kind of delusional attachment issue. Her explanation? She said she couldn't stand how I ignored her. Said being near me gave her peace, and when I didn't respond, it made her feel invisible. That's how she put it. She thought the fire would get my attention. I sat there in court, just listening. She didn't even seem angry, just calm, like everything made perfect sense in her head. The court ordered mandatory psychiatric treatment and gave her a restraining order. No contact, no approach, can't come within 500 feet of me or the gym. She didn't argue, just nodded. I can't really explain what it's like after something like that. I used to think I could tell the difference between weird behavior and actual danger. I thought she was just going through something personal, trying too hard, maybe lonely. But I was wrong. That could have been more than a car. Could have been me inside it. Now I check every face in my classes. I keep an eye on who comes in and out. I don't stay late. I don't park in the same spot. I stay near the cameras. I don't take chances. You can't always see what someone's capable of. Even if they look normal, act normal, talk to you like anyone else. Sometimes you only find out after it's too late. After the party, I didn't feel like messing with the bus or train, so I ordered a ride through the usual app. It was late, and I just wanted to get home without dealing with anyone sketchy. The guy who showed up seemed fine. Mid-30s maybe, clean car. Said hello with a smile and offered me a bottle of tea. One of those sealed ones. I don't usually take anything from strangers, but it looked unopened, so I just held it in my hand. Didn't drink it. He played soft, chill music, the kind of instrumental stuff that's supposed to help you relax. Nothing weird, just standard friendly driver behavior. He asked the usual small talk questions at first. How was the party? That kind of thing. I gave short answers, trying not to encourage too much conversation. Then he started asking more personal stuff, like what kind of food I like, favorite movies, if I prefer going out or staying in. It wasn't aggressive, just more than I expected. I figured maybe he was just chatty or bored from driving around all night. I didn't want to be rude, so I answered, but kept it pretty vague. We drove through mostly empty streets, and he didn't make any wrong turns or anything. No creepy detours, no strange stops. The ride was smooth, about 25 minutes. He didn't drive fast or erratically, and nothing stood out as wrong. Honestly, I was more focused on checking my phone than paying attention to him. He stopped right in front of my building, like exactly at the entrance, and waited until I got to the door. He even gave a small wave before driving off. At the time, it felt normal, maybe even thoughtful that he made sure I got inside safe. The only thing that stuck in my head was how talkative he was about random stuff, especially the food and movie preferences, but I brushed it off. The next morning, I saw a familiar car parked across from my building. Same make and color, but I didn't think much of it at first. It's not like he was the only one with that type of car. Plus, people live around here, and sometimes drivers live in the same areas as their customers. Seemed like a coincidence. I walked past it on my way to work and didn't bother looking inside. The windows were tinted, and I didn't see anyone in the driver's seat. It didn't cross my mind to check the plates or anything like that. But the next day, I noticed the same car again, this time parked directly in front of my apartment window. I live on the second floor, so I have a clear view of the street. I glanced out and realized the driver was inside the car. It was him. I could tell by his face, same guy from the ride. He wasn't on his phone or eating or doing anything normal. He was just sitting there, looking toward my building. Not moving. Just watching. At first, I thought maybe he had a reason. Maybe waiting for another passenger. Maybe someone else lived nearby. But it felt off. A few hours later, I needed to grab something from the store, so I went out. As soon as I stepped onto the sidewalk, I heard a beep. It was him again, still in the car. He rolled down the window, smiled like we were old friends, and said, "Hey, need a ride? I can take you wherever." He said it like it was nothing, like it was totally normal. I hadn't ordered a ride, and he wasn't near any pickup point. I told him, "No thanks, I'm just going around the corner," trying to keep it polite. He nodded but didn't drive off. Just stayed there, watching as I walked away. I didn't run or anything, just walked quicker than usual, trying to stay calm. From that evening on, I started watching the street every time I passed by the window. I kept checking to see if his car was there again. On the third day, the intercom rang while I was getting ready to leave for work. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I hesitated for a second before answering. His voice came through, calm and casual. "Hey, you left your wallet in my car the other night. I'm downstairs, just wanted to return it." My stomach dropped. I hadn't lost my wallet. I'd used it that morning, it was in my bag. Still, I didn't want to jump to conclusions. Maybe I was wrong. I figured I'd go down quickly, check, and get it over with. I stepped outside and saw him leaning against his car, holding something in his hand. But it wasn't a wallet. It was a cup of coffee. When he saw me, he smiled like we were meeting by chance. "Oh, my mistake," he said. "I must have mixed you up with someone else. While I'm here, though, need a ride anywhere?" His tone was too casual, like this was normal. I just shook my head, told him I was in a hurry, and started walking in the opposite direction. Not toward the bus stop or anywhere obvious. I didn't want him to follow me or figure out where I was actually going. I waited by a small shop for a bit, just in case, then circled back through the alley behind my building and entered through the back entrance. That night, I kept the lights off in the front room. I didn't want him seeing me through the windows. I stayed away from the street-facing side of the apartment, moving quietly, even though I knew he couldn't hear me. I barely slept. The next morning, I opened the app I used to order the ride and found the support section. I submitted a report, explaining the whole situation in plain detail. Dates, times, what he'd done, how I never asked for any of it. I kept it factual, didn't exaggerate. They got back to me within hours, saying they'd investigate and contact the driver. They assured me they took such reports seriously and would take appropriate action. I didn't know what that meant exactly, but I hoped it would at least make him stop. For a few days, it seemed to work. No sign of his car, no random messages or intercom calls. I started to relax a little, thinking maybe it was over. But then, late one evening when I was heading out, I caught a glimpse of his car again, parked farther down the street but still within view. He was in the driver's seat, watching. Not making a move, just watching. I walked quickly, pretending I didn't see him, but I could feel his eyes on me the whole way. It felt like I was being hunted. I rushed to a nearby shop and called my sister. Told her everything, straight to the point. She didn't ask questions, just told me to pack a bag and come to her place for a while. I didn't argue. That night, I stayed at her apartment on the other side of town, constantly checking the windows, half expecting his car to show up there too. It didn't, but I couldn't shake the thought that he might be looking for me. After a few days at my sister's, I knew I couldn't keep living like that. The fear of running into him again, of him waiting outside my place, had become constant. I decided I needed to move, not just across town, but out of the city altogether. I found a small apartment in another city, not too far but enough that I could disappear from his radar. I didn't tell anyone my new address except close family. No social media updates, no posts. I deleted the Ride app, closed my account completely, and even got a new bank card linked to nothing that could trace back to my old location. It took a few weeks to settle in, but eventually, things started to feel normal again. I never heard from him after that. No calls, no random appearances, nothing. I don't know if the app banned him, if he gave up, or if he's still out there looking. All I know is, since that ride, I've never let my guard down again. It's hard to explain the feeling of knowing that someone got that close, learned your address, and decided they had some claim over your life. All it took was one ride. Now, every time I step outside, I check the street first, just in case.